Chapter 576. Good gods. Freya had seen Litha's creations during Journey's birthday, but back then they were all based on a single element. Something that more or less, she too could do. She waved her hand through the hologram, feeling its warmth and shattering it into stardust. Freya, Lith said. I'm sorry, I was just too curious. It almost looked solid. Was it solid? She didn't sound sorry at all. Her hazel eyes sparkled like during their academy days when she was about to learn one of the marvels magic was capable of. I wish. Do you have any idea how hard it is to create a map? There are hundreds of streets and buildings that I cannot possibly remember. I need to be able to look at the original to keep it stable. The moment your hand covered the map, I've lost both my focus and mana. Lith snarled while creating a second one. He was actually capable of creating a map from scratch, but only if the original was stored inside Solaspedia. Sorry, Lith. This time she was sincere. Freya felt stupid for both her action and her words, yet she didn't regret them. For the first time in years, she was having fun. Ever since the academy had ended, her life had been one of duty. First, she had to take care of Quilla. Freya had helped her to retake her 5th year at the White Griffin and overcome the trauma Quilla had suffered after killing Uriel under the influence of Nalir's slave ring. Then, her sisters had left Freya alone to search for their own path in life. After all that had happened to her during the academy, Freya trusted no one and was unable to relax unless when in the safety of her own home. The Crystal Shield Guild was her creature and her cage at the same time. Leading arrogant and disgruntled mages was a full-time job that left her no time for a personal life. Lith was a safe oasis for her. Someone she could trust almost as much as Quilla, but who, unlike her sister and guild mates, didn't need her protection. Whenever they met, he always had something to teach her about magic, and that was the most precious gift anyone could give her. Don't worry, Lieutenant Yeval. Please this time read me only the addresses of all those who have no role in the city's administration. Lith said while patting Freya's shoulder. That small gesture made Camilla hate her job for the second time in as many days. Hundreds of kilometers and a snowstorm separated them, yet it was being called by her last name that exacerbated the distance between them. For a moment, she envied Freya for her strength, her magic, and because Camilla imagined her free to do what she wanted rather than what she had to. Then, she started listing the addresses, and a new pattern appeared on the map. What appeared in front of their eyes was still a mess, but at least it didn't look like a Pollock anymore. They spent a few minutes trying to make sense of the image, but to no avail. If you tilt your head and remove these dots, you can almost see a magic circle, Lith said while tapping on several locations on the map. Right idea, but wrong dots. If we ignore the dots you proposed, you can see that some of the remaining ones form this array. Freya's slender finger traced a circle above the map. The problem is that you can't ignore any of those points. If all of the locations are magically marked the same way, then they would disrupt the formation. Even if you are right, 2 overlapping arrays would cancel each other without proper insulation. Camilla's words left Freya flabbergasted. How come you are an array expert? She asked. I'm not. I just repeated what Lith and Minohar yelled at each other back in Other. They quarreled about runes and lines of power so much that I ended up learning a thing or two. Camilla chuckled. Wait a minute. I think you're both right. Check the list more carefully. Solus thought. Sons of a bitch, Lith blurted out as he realized the meaning of her words. Lieutenant Yeval, please filter the names based on the floor they live on. Like most cities surrounded by walls, Xantia had no choice but to expand vertically rather than horizontally. Most buildings were at least 3-story high. Instead of ignoring the dots, Lith split the map into 3 different layers, each one with its own set of tokens and marked with a different color. Even a layman like Camilla could easily recognize the magic circles formed by connecting the dots. Okay, this is not good, Lith said. I recognize the array on top and the one at the ground level, but I have no idea what the middle one is. The upper circle is a containment array, similar to those I use when I practice forge mastering. Its purpose is to contain great masses of energy and prevent them from escaping. It maximizes the effects of a magical procedure. The bottom one is a grounding array, used to safely disperse mana in case a spell goes out of control. I've already taken a scan of the holographic map and of the 3 arrays, Camilla said. I'll contact immediately General Vorg, the Master Warden, and call you back as soon as I have some answers. Over and out. Lith pulled the curtain covering the window to check the weather. The wind carrying the snow was so strong that he wasn't able to see further than 10 meters, even with his enhanced senses. I have no idea where the awakened could be, and even if I did, I can't risk making a move before I understand what their endgame is. Going to the Church of the Six now would be pointless. The clerics are likely to be unwitting puppets in their hands, so interrogating them would be a waste of time. The ones performing miracles are the awakened ones, but they will not show up without a crowd. Once the storm settles, I need to attend one of their ceremonies. If they made me come here, it means that they are almost done with their preparations. He thought. A bronze coin for your thoughts. Freya said. We're on the clock. The arrays are completed, and they felt so confident that one of them attacked me in the open. I don't like that they lured and trapped me here. If I don't get rid of them now, they could find me again. Also, I hate them for using arrays to perform their crap. Whenever I use an array, I can still hear Uriel whining about wardens being useless. Lith replied. His voice went from calm to stone cold when he talked about his enemies, and then it became sad while he remembered his lost friend. Me too. I miss him so much. Freya sighed. You know, right after Balkir's attack, when you and Floria started to be all lovey-dovey, he asked me if I was interested in being his friend with benefits. Sounds like Uriel. What did you answer him? Lith said with a light smile. I slapped him and said no, of course. I never regretted my choice. I'm only sad that he never got the opportunity to get the happiness he deserved. Chapter 577. Do you mind if I ask you a personal question? Freya said while pouring them some hot tea. No, but I can't guarantee you that I'll answer. Don't worry, I'm not going to pry your wall of secrets. She chuckled. We all knew you had a crush on Nailier and a soft spot for Wainmeyer. I was wondering why you never made a pass at me. Now that we are not young and stupid anymore, I'm not embarrassed to say that it hurt my pride for a bit. Well, it's simple. When we first met, you were just another pompous, stuck-up noble. After the second exam, when we started to become friends, you had already become too similar to me. Lith said, You have always been the most beautiful girl in our class, but I have a thing for cute girls, and you have never been cute. You went from obnoxious to dark and gloomy. You and I are like moons. We may shine, but our light is cold and distant. We need a sun, someone willing to walk that distance and accept us for who we are instead that for how we look like. That's why I ended up with Floria first and with Camilla now. Freya had to admit that even if they were good friends, her crazy matched Lith's crazy in all the wrong possible ways. Just the thought of being together with someone more paranoid, grumpy, and aggressive than she was gave her the creeps. Are you still practicing the impossible arrays Uriel found for us? Lith asked. Every single day? I'll always be grateful to you for teaching me the importance of first magic. There are so many things that I would have missed if I didn't follow your crazy training routine during the 5th year. I may not be able to create holograms yet, but I can assure you that once we find those rogue mages, they are in for more than one nasty surprise. She said with a ferocious grin. Since the snowstorm continued unabated and Camilla had yet to call back, they started exchanging pointers about magic. Freya revealed to him that she had kept in touch with Professor Rudd, the dimensional magic expert of the White Griffin. They were reminiscing together all the cruel words the man had said to his students in general, and to them in particular, when someone knocked on her door. I'm sorry to disturb you, Lady Ernest. A butler in a white and dark blue livery said her with a deep bow. He was a middle-aged man with receding red hair and the face of someone who had just seen a ghost. There's a guest on the door who claims to be a friend of someone named Scourge. I tried to send him away, but he refused. Some of your men intervened, but I'm afraid they will only make things worse. Did he say his name? Freya and Lith exchanged a quick glance, hearing the name magical beasts had bestowed upon him. No, I didn't even ask him about it, because he has clearly got the wrong address. Freya didn't let him finish the phrase, and opened a warp steps leading to the mansion's hallway. The front door was wide open, letting the freezing wind in as snow started to pile up on the magnificent blue and gold carpet covering the floor. Several members of the Crystal Shield Guild lay on the ground unconscious. Only a few of them had managed to even draw their weapons, but none of them had the time to use them. Not a single drop of blood had been spilled. The man in front of them was a barbarian, at least 2.1 meters, 7 foot, tall. He wore a hunter set of heavy clothes made of warm animal fur and boots bigger than a bucket. His face was rough and savage, with a square jaw and a cleft chin. The hunter's long hair and his well-trimmed beard were flaming red, with not a single snowflake on them. Even though he was lifting one of Freya's men from the neck with a single hand, waiting for him to pass out, his emerald eyes were calm and wise. There was no way Lith wouldn't recognize him, even after all those years. "Put Callum down," Freya said while unsheathing her sword. "It's good to see you again, Freya," he said with a warm smile as he let the man's feet touch the ground again, allowing him to breathe. "You may know me, but I don't know you. What do you want from Lith?" she said while never lowering her weapon. A sudden gust of wind swept her hair as a blurry figure moved past Freya and struck the hunter on the side of his jaw with pinpoint accuracy, sending him tumbling outside. "You bastard! How dare you to show your face like that?" Lith's anger was so great that, without Solas's help, his blue aura would have already filled the manor's hallway. She would have liked to say something, but even though she was already restraining his mana flow, both the lights and the shadows were seconds away from coming to life. Solas couldn't afford to lose her focus. Blood trickled from the hunter's mouth as he stood up. "You've gotten stronger, Scourge. I hoped you would rather focus on becoming a better person. Power isn't everything," the man said as if Lith had offered him his hand instead of sending him flying with a punch. 5 years. 5 fucking years without a single word from you." Wind and snow slapped Lith's face. He ignored the former, whereas the heat emanating from his skin was so strong that the latter evaporated on contact. "I almost died for you, and what did I get in return? You deceived me. You turned the only friend I had ever had against me. You abandoned me. You took away Celia from me. Tell me why I shouldn't kill you on the spot," Lith said. The snow melted and boiled under his feet as the whole street was plunged into darkness, as if the sun had been blotted out of the sky. The hunter stood tall, uncaring of the ongoing unnatural phenomenons and Lith's accusations. "You didn't do it for me, but for yourself. What I did, instead, I did it for you. To stop your madness. It was the only way I had to give you a better future, and judging from what I've heard, I'd say I succeeded. I never abandoned you. I simply couldn't afford to return and waste our sacrifice. As for Celia, she was never yours to begin with. She followed me of her own will. You are only right about one thing. I owe you. Without your reckless, selfish act, I would be dead. I live on borrowed time, your time. My life is yours to take if that's what you truly want." Protector opened his arms in a defenseless position, exposing both his neck and heart. Lith extended his clawed hands toward Protector's chest and hugged him as strong as he could. "Solas, analysis," he thought. "Protector is barely halfway blue and his physical strength hasn't improved much," she replied as Lith's fury faded. "How can you be so weak after all this time?" Lith said. Chapter 578. Raising 2 children while taking care of a pregnant wife doesn't leave much free time for training. Besides, it's not me being slow so much as you being relentless. "Do you at least have a girlfriend?" Ryman said while returning the embrace. Lith was happy to hear that his long-since-lost friends were all right, and that Protector's manners had significantly improved. In the past, he would have opened the conversation by asking Lith about his mating habits. "I do have one. Is she the one in the ring?" "No. Is she the one waiting for you on the doorsteps?" "It's a long story," Lith said. "Come inside. I doubt you are here just to see me. I would never leave Celia and the children in the middle of winter for a social call. I'm here because you need my help, Scourge." "Is this your new house?" Ryman said while pointing at the Viscount's manor. "It is now. Remember to watch your mouth. I've yet to share any of my secrets with anyone." At those words, Ryman lost his cool and stopped in his tracks. "No one knows about Solas, the Awakening, your other form, or Carl," he said with a whisper. When Lith had given Protector part of his life force to repair his damaged mana core, the Emperor Beast had access to all of his memories, even those from his life on Earth. "Tista knows about Solas and Awakening. Floria knows about my other half, but that's it. Only you and Solas know everything about me." The tone Lith used made it clear he was still unwilling to open up. "Who is this guy? How does he know my name?" Freya had put away her sword when she had seen the 2 men hugging, but her confusion still remains. "He is." Lith was searching for a plausible lie when Protector cut him short. "We briefly met during Balkir's attack. You know me with the name of Protector, but I'd like you to call me Ryman Fast Arrow." Celia says I should always introduce myself with a real name rather than just a title. Freya racked her brain, trying to remember where she had heard that name before. Her mouth almost dropped onto the ground when she realized their guest's identity. No way. You are. Lith snapped his fingers, blinking all three of them back inside Freya's room before it was too late. An emperor beast. How can you possess a human body? A hush spell prevented her voice from being heard. I didn't steal anyone's body, Ryman said with a tinge of annoyance in his voice. Once we reach this stage of evolution, we can shape-shift. It's not a big deal. A lot of creatures can do it. Lith didn't like how Protector looked at him while saying that. Yet it's a big secret among beasts, like the fact that they can talk. Lith chimed in. He is putting a lot of trust in you. Most humans would go crazy if they knew that beasts and plants can shape-shift. Do you remember Gadorf the Wyvern? He was able to do the same. His words calmed her a bit, but not much. Suddenly she had no idea how to recognize who was human and who was just pretending to be one. I need to sit and something strong to drink. She shook her head, hoping the room would stop spinning soon. How is Celia doing? Lith asked. I had to propose to her to make her move away from Lucia on such short notice. Ryman's words made Freya choke on her drink. Isn't Celia a woman? I mean a human? Are you two really married? She blurted out. Lith had to repress laughter. The same Protector who was always so patient and kind, the closest thing to a magical father figure Lith had, was now dilating his nostril in annoyance. Yes, yes, and yes. If you keep stating the obvious, I'll never get to the point, though. Freya became beet red and hid her face behind her glass. I need something stronger, she thought as she put the wine away and took a bottle of Griffin Fire out of her pocket dimension. A single malt whiskey with over 50% of alcohol content. Everything went fine until our first daughter was born. Thank the Great Mother. After almost getting killed, I became proficient in healing magic, so Celia didn't need a midwife. It would have been a mess since Lilia had quite a fur. Freya had one shot at the word daughter and another at fur. Was she a hybrid? Lith asked, giving Freya plenty of reasons for a third shot. Yes. Useless to say, Celia didn't take it well. She yelled at me for lying to her and kicked me out of our house. To be fair, I didn't lie. She never asked, and I never thought of a reason for telling her about me being an emperor beast. How could you not tell her? That's a pretty big elephant, you know? Freya said. I came out of the woods naked. I told her I knew her for a long time, and I had uncanny magic powers. I thought it was pretty obvious. She must have thought you were a friendly but nutjob mage. What kind of logic is yours? Another shot bit the dust. Is my life a drinking game, or what? Gods, now I understand why you never speak about yourself with anyone. Silly me thinking you and Celia were just paranoid. Protector took the bottle away. She had already started slurring her words. Are you saying that Lith is an emperor beast too? Freya was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. No, he's not. His body is on par with a veteran magical beast, but it's weak compared to an emperor. Shut your damn mouth. Lith couldn't believe how stupidly sincere Ryman was. He must have survived this far because Celia has him under her thumb. He thought, I need more alcohol. Small sparks of light appeared around the bottle, making part of its content fill her glass again. Master of space, remember? Freya was happy her ability with dimensional ability was able to shock the two monsters she was sharing the room with. After a few days, she calmed down and allowed me to return home. Celia was still pretty pissed off, but she had no idea how to raise a hybrid, which made her desperate for help. She was afraid that if humans found out about Lilia, they would kill her. After I managed to make our daughter turn into her human form, things went smoothly, and after a few months, she forgave me. Now everything is settled. We had a son, Laren, and now Celia is carrying our third one. Celia picked all of their names in your honor. She says that without you, we would have never met, and that without your sacrifice, she would have been forced to raise our child alone. You are their godfather, so you should visit them sometimes. On Mogar, it was custom to name a child with the same initial letter of the most esteemed member of the family as a good omen. Lith was moved by Celia's consideration towards him. After Lith told him the part of his story Freya was allowed to know and they were caught up, Protector explained to them the reason for his coming. Chapter 579. After almost dying by the hands of Balkir's valor, I understood I needed to study magic more seriously. Whenever I'm not providing for my family or raising my children, I study under a powerful emperor beast, Faluel the Hydra. I never forgot about my debt of gratitude towards you, so I asked Faluel to inform me if she ever heard something about you. That's how I learned about your predicament. Fighting 3 amazing mages alone, it's difficult to even for someone as experienced as you are. I still regret not learning about Nailier until it was too late. I couldn't be there for you then, but I'm not leaving you alone this time. Protector said. You know a Hydra? Freya had already reached the point where no amount of alcohol could calm her down anymore. Yes, she is my mentor. I'm sure she would gladly help you too, Lith. Except during winter. She hates the cold. Wait, how does she know about Xancha's situation? Lith asked. The Lord of the Keller region somehow spectated your fight. Emperor beasts don't care about humans, but look after their own. He knew I was looking out for you, and he alerted Faluel. You know the rest. Gods, I can't believe it. Magical beasts sent reinforcements to help you, whereas the army is still sitting on its thumbs. Freya had no idea that Lith had reported about the existence of only 2 awakened ones to protect his cover. Magical beasts care only for themselves, whereas the army has to protect the entire country. Lith said while winking at Protector to make him shut up. Lith told Protector everything he knew about the Church of the Six, the group of awakened one he had fought, and showed him the arrays they had planted inside the city. Do you really know even about arrays? Protector was flabbergasted. Does this Camilla really exist, or is she made up? He can't possibly take care of her, his job, their cubs, and be so good at magic. No cubs. Litha's voice was stone cold, while Freya giggled due to being tipsy and because of Litha's embarrassment. But you are together for. No cubs, and not planning on making them. Litha's army amulet blinked, signaling an incoming call and giving him an excuse to change the topic. Contrary to his expectations, it wasn't Camilla's hologram which materialized in the middle of the room, but General Vorgas. He was a short old man, barely 1.5 meters, 5 foot, tall, wearing the light blue uniform of the army. Judging by the several wrinkles on his face and the spots on his skin, he had to be at least 70 years old. Yet his sky-blue eyes had the wild vibe of a predator on the chase. His short white hair and finely trimmed beard shone like silver fur under the sun, reinforcing everyone's impression of being staring at a beast of the north. The man's sleeves bore a silver star. It identified him with the rank of Brigadier General. His right hand was wielding a staff made of white oak with 6 violet magic crystals engraved on it in a straight line. 6 more floated above its top, forming a perfect circle that orbited around the staff and followed its every movement. Lith had already seen it in action. It allowed Vorg to use impossible arrays as if he was an awakened. The 6 engraved magic crystals were likely to be its power source, whereas the floating ones were responsible for creating the true arrays and harmonizing the world energy with Vorg's mana. Spellbreaker Varan, I'm afraid you are facing madmen. The title Vorg addressed Lith with made those present aware of the gravity of the situation. Before we speak, you should send away these people. Civilians can't be involved in a military operation, he said while pointing at Freya and Ryman. General Vorg, allow me to introduce you Lady Freya Ernest and Ryman Fastarrow. I conscripted them to help me. They have all the right to know since they are putting their lives on the line along with mine. Lith said, so be it. I agree with your assessment of the 2 arrays you identified, but you have failed to grasp how they interact with the 3rd one. To be honest, I'm not sure either. Mine are just speculations, but it's all I have to offer you for now. Lith nodded Vorg to continue as Solus griped, due to mana sense not working on holograms. She would have really liked to take a closer look at the staff's pseudo-core. The array between the grounding and the containment ones was called Third Eye by its creator and Fool's Gold by everyone else. It channels the world energy inside a mage's body, making it possible for them to awaken their hidden talents. No one uses it, though, because not only are its effects just temporary, but also using it greatly shortens its user's lifespan. Horan Polaner became one of Mogur's most powerful mages for almost 2 days before dying for its side effects. No one uses Fool's Gold because it doesn't really give you any power. It simply condenses your life force, so you can achieve for a few months the power you would get in 2 years of practice by losing 10 years in the process. The news stunned both Lith and Protector. Even awakened ones had to take care of their life force because it couldn't be replenished. Accumulation and invigoration slowed down its consumption, but they didn't affect the amount of life force one was born with. Litha's death vision was a consequence of his attempt to saving Protector's life at the expense of his own. The worst thing is that whoever modified Polaner's array turned it into forbidden magic, Vorg said, making Lith even more confused. If a mage can get more power by simply sacrificing lives, I would expect it to be one of the most popular crimes. Why have I never heard of it before? He asked. Because it doesn't work that way. Your talent requires your life force, your memory, your experiences. Vorg explained. The upper containment array is used to store and amplify the world energy. Fool's Gold will temporarily enhance the talent of its user, and the grounding array will discharge the excess energy, using the people affected by the griever as a medium. It's not an illness. Those two mages injected their own mana inside others to both form the arrays and use them as catalysts. That way, the whole city will take part in the process and all its inhabitants will lose a decade or two of life. What could they possibly gain from that? Lith asked. My hypothesis is that they plan to lessen Fool's Gold side effects by using the least necessary amount of world energy and discharging the rest on the population. This way, instead of losing 20 years, they could reduce it to 18. Vorg replied. It's a negligible amount. That's why I say they are madmen. The use of forbidden magic is a game changer. We are sending you spell breakers as soon as possible. Normally, it would take them a couple of hours to get there between preparations and traveling, but the snowstorm will slow things down. The only other piece of good news I can give you is where you can find those responsible. To benefit from Fool's Gold's effects, the mage must be exactly in the middle of it. When they activate the array, it will become visible. Good luck, Spellbreaker Verhan. Vorg ended the call. Chapter 580. What's our next move? Freya asked. Even though we now know their endgame, we can't just sit idly. Once the array is activated, there's no telling how long the process will take. I don't want to lose years of life. I agree. We must make our move before they get the upper hand. Raman said. We must lure them out in the open, and to do it, we need to break their toy. Without the people affected by the griever, their array will break. The only reason why they do not get themselves healed is that they have fallen for the church's deception. We need to get rid of the church and heal those morons. Lith said. After learning about the presence of more than 2 awakened inside Xantia, Lith had been forced to give up on his original plan of storming the church in his hybrid form. It was something he had to do on his own since it would have been hard to explain to Freya about his shape-shifting abilities. Protector's arrival was truly a blessing. He was both an excellent fighter and a perfect cover for what was going to happen. Freya already knew about Litha's abnormal body, death vision, and about him sharing his life force with Ryman. Now all Lith needed was a better understanding of the Church of the Six teachings before giving those awakened a taste of their own medicine. Just a few kilometers away from Viscount Krame's mansion, the 4 remaining awakened were arguing about their plan and cursing Kieran's name. If not for his childish pride of being the next heir of the Blood Desert's best assassin, everything would still be on the right track. We have no choice. We must continue even without Duraniel. Alias said. Like Pelion, she was native of the Gorgon Empire. Her blue mana core was as strong as Litha's, whereas her body was weaker than his. Her master had awakened her when she already had a green mana core. Her body needed a lot of time to adapt, and she still needed help to survive whenever it was the moment to expel the impurities for a breakthrough. She was 1.75 meters, 5 feet 9 inches, tall with light blonde hair and green eyes. Thanks to being an awakened, her figure would make most men break their necks while turning their heads at her passing. Yet among the awakened ones, she was just one of many. Agreed. Not all of us have an awakened daddy like Duraniel. There's always next year, my ass. Pelion said while imitating Duraniel's accent and spitting on the fireplace, turning it into a pillar of fire with a spark of mana. I'm not saying to give up on the plan. I need Third Eye as much as you do. I'm just saying that maybe we should delay it. If we leave Xantia now, the council will never find us. Benyo nervously bit her nails. She was 1.77 meters, 5 feet 10 inches, with flaming red hair and hazel eyes. She possessed a bright cyan mana core, but thanks to her master awakening her when she was very young, her body refinement had been easy, at least compared to her companions. Thanks to that, her body was stronger than Aelia, and her figure was even better. Delay it? We'll never get another opportunity like this. The city is isolated and the arrays are set in place. If you are so afraid, then I say that we start the ritual now and then we run away as fast as we can. During spring and summer, it would be impossible to keep so many people locked inside their homes. Not to mention we will probably be already dead. Jaren said. He was 1.8, 5 feet 11 inches, meters tall, with brown hair and eyes. He wasn't as tall nor bulky as Pelion was, but he had the build of a professional fighter. He had a bright cyan mana core, and his body was on par with Binyo, allowing him to go hand-to-hand with magical beasts. He and Binyo were native of the Griffin Kingdom, but it didn't make them any less scared. The use of forbidden magic was a crime even in the awakened community. In case the council discovered their extracurricular activities, they were as good as dead. Yet they weren't afraid of the council so much as of their own masters. An awakened mage was considered responsible for all of their disciples, so they would never bestow their gifts upon someone for nothing. Awakening was a rare phenomenon, and not all of those who managed to do it on their own would live long enough to become hard to kill. There were those who died of starvation, in battle, or simply due to their own stupidity. So, when an awakened mage needed an heir, they would pick up one or more talented youths as their apprentices. The one who succeeded would inherit their legacy, while the others had to find a new master or die. Duraniel was an exception since his master was also his own father. Even if he failed, Tazar would not kill him. Kieran was another exception. Lasalia only picked one apprentice at the time and disposed of them as soon as she found them wanting. Ever since Lith had destroyed the Black Star, Lasalia had used him as a benchmark to push her disciple to and beyond his limits. With his life on the line, Kieran had soon started to hate Lith's guts, fearing that the rogue awakened's feats would be the death of him. The remaining members of the group were the cream of the crop in their own territory, but only thanks to Third Eye. They were all brilliant, but not geniuses. With their talent alone, they could see the top of the mountain, but never reach it. That was the reason why they had resorted to using such an elaborate scheme. They had met each other during council meetings, bonding thanks to their mutual age and problems. Together, they had managed to alter Third Eye with forbidden magic, so that they would split his effects, both good and bad, equally between the 6 of them. They would still lose a consistent amount of their life force, but the ritual had brought them to the top. They had calculated that to beat their competition, they would lose a total of 200 years of life each. It was a small price to pay to inherit their master's legacy and territory, especially if the alternative was dying young after having spent their whole lives slaving away. Just like Vorg had said, the forbidden magic allowed them to slightly mitigate the cost of the ritual each time they performed it. Yet even 1 year of life force mattered, since thanks to accumulation, it would last 10 if not 20 times as much. The humans they harmed didn't matter. They would lose their own life force and die decades later, making their deaths seemingly unrelated. The 6 awakened had lured Lith for 2 reasons. The first was to use him as the 7th member and further reduce the strain on their life force. The second was because Kieran wanted to get rid of him and prove to be the best fighter in the 3 great countries. Yet the plan was to make them fight after the ritual, not before. They needed both of them alive, especially since as a rogue Lith had no connection with the council, so he couldn't report them even if he managed to escape. The wormling arrival, though, had proven them to be dead wrong. Chapter 581. We haven't gotten this far just to quit with our tail between our legs. Alias said, I need to continue being my master's favorite student at all costs. She has already killed all those who didn't pass her exams. There's so few of us left that she is bound to pick her heirs soon, and it's going to be me. She exchanged a meaningful look with her companions. They were all in the same boat. If we take Verhen alive, the damage will be split among 5 instead of 7, but a shorter life is better than no life at all. If the wormling exposed us, our masters would have already called me and Pelion back. Luckily, beasts do not care for humans. Kieran must have angered it, and Duraniel got caught in the crossfire because they were always together. I agree with Jaren. We must wrap this up quickly and get out of here before something else happens. Since the other 3 agreed, Binyo could only follow. The group decided to complete the ritual as soon as the snowstorm peaked again, forcing the human foci of the spell to remain in their place. Lith spent the rest of the morning shouting orders and making preparations. He conscripted all of Xantia's mages for his plan. Most of them were unwilling to serve under a new master, especially one who didn't explain to them what they were about to do. They were either city healers or noble heirs. I may have not studied at one of the 6 great academies, but I took an oath as a healer, and my family has loyally served the kingdom for generations. The most annoying of them was Baroness Turnas, a minor healer. First you had the guards kidnap us from our homes, and now you want to order us around as if we are slaves? There's a reason I didn't join the army. I demand to know why we are trapped inside the city hall and what purpose this assembly has. There were too many whispers and nodding of approval to dismiss her request. Those are all excellent questions. Allow me to answer. Litha's eyes became 2 blue torches fueled by his mana as he unleashed his killing intent against the over 100 mages in front of him. The weakest among them almost fainted. They fell onto the ground, gasping for air. The terror invading their bodies had almost made them forget how to breathe. The others were covered in cold sweat, unable to take their eyes off Lith, like deer in front of oncoming headlights. He grabbed Baroness Turnas by the neck, lifting her like she was just a rag doll. There is a crisis at hand, and I need healers. He explained with a calm voice while a stream of lightning coursed through her body, sending her in a seizure. You are here because quantity has a quality all its own. Lith healed her as the smell of ozone and burned flesh spread throughout the room. I didn't call you here for a debate. Opinions are like assholes, everyone got one. You are trapped here because you are untrustworthy. Another lightning, another seizure. Lith was careful, not letting her faint nor tightening her throat so much that she couldn't scream. This assembly has a purpose you'll be made aware of when the time comes, and not a second sooner. I need your obedience, not your trust. Lith healed her again, releasing a bit more of killing intent and making everyone fell to their knees, incapable even of looking him in the eyes. You are either part of the solution or part of the problem. Those of you who agreed to help me will be compensated for their service. As for the others, more lightning bolts and screams completed the sentence for him. Any more questions? Some of them were crying. Others had wet themselves due to the mental pressure Litha's mana and hostility exuded. All of them fell in line and nodded like parrots even after Lith had left the room. He couldn't afford to reveal any detail of his plan without it leaking. There was no telling who was affiliated with the church among his recruits' families, friends, or neighbors. Freya helped Wyra, one of the few members of her guilds who she actually trusted, with her investigation about the church. They promised the former staff of House Crane that they would be reinstated if they provided useful information. Protector couldn't help either Lith nor Freya, so he flew among the clouds and did all he could to mitigate the storm. He couldn't stop such a force of nature, but he could at least delay it to buy the others the time they needed. Thanks to Protector's efforts, the snow had almost ceased to fall. The Church of the Six was full to the brim of loyal worshippers who were scared of the storm as much as they were of the sudden disappearance of the healers. Lith had spread the rumor that the Griever had turned into a plague, forcing all the mages in the city to work together to contain the disease. He wanted them to be so scared that they would ignore the risk of a new snowstorm and assemble in the church. It was the only bait he had to lure the awakened in the open. Dear brothers and sisters, I'm very happy to see so many of you despite the harsh trials this winter has put us all through, said the High Cleric of the Church of the Six. He was an average man, 1.67 meters, 5 feet 6 inches, tall with brown hair and eyes. His voice was deep and confident. With his stocky build and round nose, he wasn't a good-looking man, but his manners were calm and amiable, making people inclined to listen to his words. He was good at manipulating the crowd. First, he would make them feel close to each other by reminding them of all the common injustices they suffered from, and then he offered them a conveniently simple scapegoat to blame and an even simpler solution. All they had to do was to follow his words. I know the Griever is getting worse, but rest assured, none of it is your fault. Thanks to your sacrifice, the 6 sovereigns are slowly recuperating. Giving up on magic for your daily activities makes everything harder, but it's for the greater good. By not contaminating the world energy with your mana, you will allow the gods to soon return among us. I know that they are pleased with us because several of you have been finally relieved from your tribulation. Glory to the sovereigns. The relatives of the victims of the Griever who had recently been healed praised the High Cleric's words. They were simply people not meant to contribute at the array who had been harmed only to keep the others in line. It's only due to the blind selfishness of the mages that we have to work and suffer every day. They continue to profit from their ancestors' betrayal, using powers that don't belong to them for their own good. Each time they use a spell, the world energy gets depleted and our mogre gets closer to its end. The High Cleric said, according to the Church's beliefs, there was only a finite amount of world energy. With the sovereigns gone, it couldn't replenish itself. It was all bogus since energy couldn't be created nor destroyed. It could only be transferred or changed from one form to another. The day of reckoning is upon them. Soon the gods will return and punish them for. A sphere of light the size of a chariot appeared above the main altar. Those present fell to their knees, praying with all their might, with the only exception of the clerics who stared in horror as space was torn apart by the monstrosity they believed to have summoned with their ramblings. Chapter 582. The sphere of light turned into a gateway, which apparently led to another dimension full of stars and planets floating in the middle of space. A monstrous creature emerged from the portal on top of a fiery beast, turning the joy of the worshippers into terror. The rider stood slightly over 2 meters tall and was covered in thick, curved black scales. Both his hands and feet ended in razor-sharp claws enveloped in black flames. A set of upside-down membranous wings came out of his back, producing with each of their flaps a gust of wind strong enough to rival with the outside storm. His face was a black slate with no nose nor ears, but his 7 eyes made everyone recognize him on the spot. Each one of the 6 eyes on his face burned with a different color of mana which emphasized his pitch-black vertical pupils. The 7th one on his forehead was deep blue and without a pupil. "Isn't that the All-Father?" everyone asked while staring in horror as the scales over his mouth opened, revealing a mouth full of fangs and blue fire. The killing intent the rider and high mount emanated made them unable to move or even to avert their gaze. Shivers went down their spines, and the warm air inside the church became so cold that they could see their own breath steaming. "Silence. You have relinquished your gifts, your free will, and your life. You have no right to say my name. Food doesn't get to talk, it only gets digested." The portal behind the All-Father closed, and all the shadows in the room came to life, overwhelming their owners. The worshippers were soon pinned to the ground by a distorted version of themselves. The dark forms had their faces twisted by an insatiable hunger, bright yellow eyes, and a white maw instead of a mouth. "Fenrir, devour them," he ordered to his steed, a huge beast resembling a divine wolf. Its shoulder height reached 2.5 meters, 8 feet 3 inches, making its rider's head almost touch the ceiling. Its whole body was covered by a flaming red fur and enveloped in a deep blue flame. It erupted with greater intensity from its neck, making it look like a mane. The monster had 2 curved horns coming out of its forehead, right in front of its ears, eagle-like feathered wing coming out from its back, and its tail was made out of dancing blue flames. Fenrir's howl made the ground quake and cracked the church's walls like they were just made of sand. All those trapped by their own shadows felt their strength being sapped as small spheres of light came out of their bodies and moved towards the All-Father. Aelia and Pelion were watching at the show from a surveillance mirror. They recognized the spell as what Duraniel had called demons of darkness. It was a variation of spirit magic they had never seen before. They had yet to make a move because their minds were frozen in a stupor. Everything had happened too fast and at the worst possible moment. They had no spell at the ready, and facing one-on-one an Emperor Beast wasn't a nice perspective. Yet they had no choice but to act. If the Church of the Six collapsed, people would let themselves be healed, making it impossible for them to trigger the third eye array. He's not the All-Father, but just a pretender. We know it well because we are the sovereigns. Aelia and Pelion appeared from a warp steps. They unleashed a blinding light that dispersed the shadows and freed all of those present. Really? Wasn't that just a spell? Didn't you just come from a common room? The All-Lith laughed, unleashing a Tier 5 spell, while Protector did the same. The two awakened had nothing to counter such a sudden and powerful move, so they blinked to safety. "Where the heck are you guys? We need help." Aelia yelled at her communication amulet. Everyone was now free to look around. Nothing in her demeanor or looks was very godlike. She sounded afraid, and she was using a pricey yet common tool. Pelion quickly cast a Tier 3 stream of lightning bolts while emitting a powerful blue aura. Air magic? This is insulting. Protector sighed. Even when he was still an evolved monster, air and fire were his natural elements. Manipulating them came as easy as breathing to him. He had over 30 years of experience with it, and 5 more since he had evolved into an emperor beast. By combining his will with Lith's, they didn't need to make a single move. The closer the lightning bolts came to them, the smaller they got, until they disappeared in a puff of smoke. Nice trick. Do you work at birthday parties too? I'll show you what a real god can do. Fenrir, attack. The All-Lith said, making Protector snarl. He hated corny speeches, and even more getting hit in the reins by Lith's clawed feet like he really was a steed. Yet he didn't complain and directed his fury against the two awakened by unleashing the Tier 4 spell Flaming Tornado. Using its light as a cover, Lith gave Protector the convened signal and breathed into it a burst of origin flames. Thanks to his elemental mastery, Protector made it so that the origin flames were stuck in the eye of his tornado without them damaging their surroundings. The air element amplified the power of Lith's flames, whereas the fire element of Flaming Tornado was sacrificed to prevent them from spreading outwards. The resulting effect was akin to a fire pillar produced by a baler, but entirely made of origin flames. The blue pillar destroyed everything on its path, making stone evaporate and turning wood into ashes. Aelia and Pelion used their defensive amulets, conjuring a barrier made of pure mana to shield themselves from the attack. Yet no matter how much energy they poured into them, the boosted and focused origin flames were eating at it with a speed visible at the naked eye. The amulets became hot due to the stress their pseudo-core was under. Lith and Protector were doing their best to make it look easy, but neither breathing origin flames non-stop nor keeping them under control was a simple feat. We need to get away. Pelion yelled as the flames started to get past the barrier and ate at his enchanted clothes. How do you propose to do that? If we lose our focus, we are dead. Aelia's prayers were answered by 2 warp steps opened by their companions, who pulled them back to the safety of their room. Damn, Lith said. According to his plan, the other 2 awakened were supposed to try and attack him from behind, where Freya was ready to ambush them. Unluckily, even the most perfect plan doesn't survive contact with the enemy. Cowards, show yourself, he said while both he and Protector used invigoration to restore their strength. Plan B it is. Freya warped outside and then walked through the main door, enveloped in a golden light like a hero from the legends. With each of her strides, the shadows which had just started to come to life again screamed and died. Chapter 583. Begone, monster. You don't belong in this world, she said while pointing her rune-covered rapier against the All-Lith. The golden light pushed the shadows back and made the killing intent which had oppressed the worshippers until that moment disappear. It is not by my will that I was summoned here. I only answered the call of humans who want to pay me tribute. The All-Lith replied. Tribute? You steal their freedom and treat them as nothing but food. Freya couldn't believe that she was actually following Lith's script. Foolish girl. The same could be said of all religions. The All-Lith and his steed charged forward. Run away. I'll hold him as long as I can. Freya flew forward, slashing against the rider. Her rapier produced a silvery sound as it clashed against the All-Lith's arm. People stared in awe as the small figure managed to stop the 2 monsters alone. Many of them knew Freya and despised her for being Viscount Krame's henchman. Now their eyes were filled with tears of gratitude and their hearts with admiration. We should have never doubted our mages, many said, while helping those who were too weak to get up on their own due to the emotional roller coaster they had experienced. Suckers, Lith said with a wide grin as Protector continued to step back, pretending that the fight was balanced. Is there something you can't do with those holograms? Freya whispered while making sure that her back prevented the spectators from seeing Lith's human arm appearing where her blade made contact with it. I wish. I can't hold on for long. It was a lie. Only his eyes were covered by holograms, making them appear as if they were opened. Lith had simply reverted his arm to its human form upon contact. They kept fighting spell against spell, claws against blade. Every of their move was dramatic and heroic, to the point it looked like an epic battle straight out of the legends. It was all staged, of course. Their spells were flashy, made to appear powerful, but had no substance. They were weaker than first magic, barely a light show. As soon as everyone got outside, the three mortal enemies stopped to plan their next move. I'd say that the Church of the Six is done, Freya said as both Lith and Protector reverted to their human form. Ryman purposely produced a flash of light to blind her long enough for Lith to build and destroy a hologram that could cover his transformation. Indeed, I was expecting them to attack us during our little play, but they seemed to be otherwise occupied. Ryman pondered while using air magic to reproduce the sounds of a heated battle and witty one-liners. At this point, they have no choice left but to activate the arrays now. Even if some of the spell's foci are out of place, they had enough to spare in case something happened. Lith used his army amulet to make sure that Plan C was going smoothly. A yelp and a no accompanied an explosion big enough to make the whole building crumble. The alleged monsters had allegedly been defeated. The crowd still around the church exploded into cheers and applause as the three walked out of the debris. The mercenary, the ranger, and the hunter smiled at their audience. Lith even raised his hands while holding Ryman's and Freya's before giving those present a bow, just like they were actors. The cheers and applauses intensified. Good gods, how did you become a man who can see a whole city almost ripped to shreds and joke like that? Freya angrily whispered. For them, us saving their city might be the most important day of their life. But for me, it was just another day's work. Litha's reply earned him a nudge in his ribs from both of his partners. We have no time to waste. According to General Vorg, they must be at the center of the array. If even Plan C goes awry, we're screwed. Freya chanted her spells with astounding speed, urging Lith to do the same. This time, the awakened would be prepared and have the home advantage. Lith chanted gibberish, giving Solus the task to provide for Plan F while he took care of Plan E. He had to keep them both a secret, or the others would never let him hear the end of it. I'm completely against Plan E, and I wish you to reconsider. Solus thought. This time it will be 3 against 4. 4 versus 4 at best, if we give away your existence. But what if they have prepared more arrays? I'm not going to risk the life of any of you. You mess with the scourge, you get buried. Period. Lith ended the argument before it even started. Ryman opened a warp steps leading to their destination as soon as the chanting ended. Dimensional magic was mana expensive, and Freya was the only one among them who wasn't an awakened. She is the weak link. I have to make sure that nothing happens to her. Freya is a good person, and I don't want to see Lith experience any more grief. The next time he snaps, it could be the last one. Ryman thought. The warp steps led them to a spot far enough from the array's epicenter to not make them visible with life vision, but close enough to check their surroundings for traps. All clear, Lith said after performing the array detecting spell and using both his own and Solus's mystical senses. Same. I can't sense any suspicious sound or smell. Ryman found the lack of enemy traps disturbing. He had checked for undead, explosives, and even hidden soldiers to no avail. They flew toward the center of the array, and soon they were able to see 4 figures high in the sky. The 4 awakened moved rhythmically, using invigoration to conjure more and more world energy. It would ensure them the successful activation of third eye even if they lacked a few focal points. Due to the temporary relief from the storm, people might have left their homes. The 4 were arranged back to back in a circle, covering all the possible directions their opponents could come from without leaving a blind spot. They are here, Benio said. Things couldn't have gotten any worse. With only 4 of them, third eye would take a big chunk of her life force. To add insult to injury, the makeshift addition to the ritual would ensure its activation, but they were likely to lose the grounding array's effect and even more life force in the process. I hope there is a special place in the afterlife for idiots like you, Kieran. She inwardly cursed. Let them come. Ready on my mark. Alias said. Her face looked like it had been chiseled in stone. She had sacrificed too much to allow anyone to stop her. All of them knew the risks involved when they had accepted to become awakened. Back then, however, death seemed something distant, whereas now it was waiting for them around the corner. Now, at her signal, a golden 6-pointed star appeared in the space between them. It soon grew enough to cover all the space around them for over 100 meters, 328 feet. Silverwing's hexagram was one of the most common training routines for awakened ones. 4 of them could cast it quickly and suppress any enemy, thanks to invigoration providing them with endless mana. Litha's group suddenly lost their flight spell and gravity did the rest. Chapter 584. Nothing works. Freya said. None of the items Orion had prepared for her could project its energy outwards. Under the seal of the hexagram, only inner energies like fusion magic could be used. She wasn't worried about dying. The enchanted armor she wore still worked, and it would prevent the fall from being lethal. Yet without magic, they had no way to stop the 4 criminals. I know. Protector's voice was peaceful. He took a deep breath, and the world stopped moving. He was the first one to disappear, quickly followed by his 2 companions. What the heck? They blinked away. Jaren couldn't believe his own eyes. Stop spouting bullshit. They are still inside the array. Had they attempted any spell, we would have felt it and countered it in a jiffy. Pelion could still sense Litha's group presence thanks to the enhanced mana perception the hexagram provided to all 4 of them, yet he couldn't pinpoint them. At least not until one of Protector's horns rammed at him with the force of a freight train. After almost being killed by a single move of the 2 Emperor beasts, this time Pelion had come to the fight prepared. The moment Benyo had spotted the incoming enemies, he had activated his armor's pseudo-core to boost its defensive abilities at the expense of duration. The enchanted protection his master had forge-mastered for him was now 5 times stronger than usual. Such a powerful effect came at a price, though. It would take less than 2 minutes for the pseudo-core to exhaust its mana, and when that happened, his armor would be no different from normal clothes for hours. Fights were supposed to not last for long, and Pelion would return home as soon as they were done with the Third Eye ritual. It was a perfect plan, at least on paper. Despite the armor's boosted effect, despite Earth fusion making Pelion's body as durable and heavy as stone, he was sent flying out of the formation. All of his precautions had prevented him from being skewered by the horn, but he still took a lot of damage. His sternum cracked along with several ribs, making him spit a mouthful of blood as he fought to regain control over his own flight spell. Silverwing's hexagram disappeared, making it possible for Litha's group to use magic again. Lith and Freya jumped off Protector's back as he disappeared again. Where did he go? Aelia didn't panic and kept her focus on her ritual. She could feel the energy accumulated in the air closing to its critical mass. He did another invisible blink, Jaren said while turning his head in every direction, hoping to spot the Emperor Beast's exit point. It's you who blinked, not me. Protector struck Jaren with one of his horns, sending the awakened flying and following up with a Tier 4 spell, Shadow Edge. A darkness-infused air blade cut deeply into Jaren's defenses and sapped his strength. There's just the 2 of us left. Benyo had several spells at the ready, but had no idea which one to use without exposing herself or her companions to the Emperor Beast's impossible attacks. Lith darted toward her, well aware of her eyes blazing with mana. They are all using life vision. Dimensional magic is useless. I can only employ fusion magic to move faster, he thought. Freya stayed behind, casting one spell after the other. A Mage Knight's role was to support and protect their companions. She would join the fight the moment the others required her help, not a second sooner. How the heck can these guys use Silverwing's hexagram? Even by combining their strength, it's supposed to be impossible. Speaking of impossible, how does Ryman warp space without opening a dimensional door? She wondered. The answer was pretty simple. He wasn't blinking, just flying with his wings. Ryman was so fast that from such a close distance, not even the Awakened's enhanced senses could follow his movements. Now that he could use air magic again to support his wings, he had become even faster. In an aerial fight, anyone could fly, yet those born with wings had superior speed and maneuverability. Seeing that Jaren and Pelion had yet to recover, Benyo clapped her hands and activated the Tier 4 spell Chasing Lightning. Several golden magic circles appeared around her, and from each circle erupted a bolt of lightning, which resembled a snake in both motions and appearance. The lightning bolts moved toward Lith in a zigzag pattern, slower than normal, but they were still very fast. Thanks to air fusion and his flight spell, Lith managed to dodge all of them, yet his efforts bought him less than a second of advantage. Being true to their name, the thunderbolts turned around and chased after him. Yet even a split second was more than enough for Lith. He took the gatekeeper out of his pocket dimension, infusing both himself and the sword with all elements. Benyo could only unsheath her own blade, an Estoc, and use fusion magic too. None of the opposing teams could use Tier 5 magic. The slightest mistake at handling spells with such a big area of effect would hurt their companions. Benyo froze in place when she saw how fast Litha's blade moved. I can't dodge, I have to block it. She lunged at the gatekeeper's tip, to use it as a leverage point to deflect the much heavier blade with her own. Unfortunately, even though fusion magic boosted both of them, it made the gap in their physical abilities even wider. To make matters worse, the gatekeeper's ability to channel the elements made it faster, heavier, and sharper than most enchanted blades could be. When the two weapons clashed, Benyo almost lost the grip on her rapier and remained defenseless from her waist to her chin. Litha's slash blasted away her guard and opened a diagonal cut from her left shoulder to her left hip. Chasing lightning was almost upon him. He had no time to follow up with another attack. Thanks for falling into my trap, you moron. Alia and Benyo had a smug grin as the world energy that they had painstakingly accumulated up to that point was released. Alia used Blink on her two missing teammates to bring them back at the epicenter of Third Eye. The three arrays forming the magical formation became visible to the naked eye. The awakened ones used their own mana to channel the gathered mass of world energy through the magical focus points scattered along Xantia. The magic circles encompassed the entire city up to its tall walls, creating so much light that they would have been visible for kilometers if not for the ongoing storm. We managed to split the damage among 5, yet it's just a partial victory. Activating the third eye during a moment of quiet means that there will be a lot of witnesses. Once we are done with those 3, Xantia has to disappear. Alia thought. Wiping out a whole city was dangerous, but doing otherwise implied an even greater risk. Lady Tyrus was bound to know about Kieran's trespassing in Xantia, and if anyone recognized the use of forbidden magic, she would interrogate Duranial. At that point, their lives would end and all of their efforts be squandered. A snowstorm wiping out a city was uncommon, but not unthinkable of in the north. Chapter 585. The residual energy the awakened ones had planted inside the victims of the Griever formed several dots in the sky that stabilized the arrays. Lith could feel his entire body going on fire as the cracks present on his life force were about to be burst open once again. Yet the dots were too few to sustain any of the 3 arrays, which collapsed on themselves due to their inability to store so much world energy. That's actually my line. Lith unleashed the Tier 5 spell Raging Sun he had kept at the ready for that precise moment. A burst of violet flames engulfed the space around him with the strength and the heat of a volcanic eruption. Freya and Protector were safe from the spell, whereas all of Litha's enemies were close enough to be caught in its area of effect. I love it when a plan comes together. Lith was smiling inside and outside. Before going to the church, Lith had mobilized the city guards and the conscripted healers. Their role had been to forcefully heal the victims of the Griever, eliminating the focus points that the arrays required to function properly. While he kept the awakened ones occupied, the healers had dismantled Third Eye in his stead. Well, at least Plan C succeeded. Maybe third time really is the charm. Sola said. The enemies were still all alive, so she continued to focus in case the worst happened. Crazy bastard. He really pulled it off. Freya activated Full Guard and Dimensional Ruler. Her body was now surrounded by 2 auras, one blue and the other golden. She had already consumed a top-tier potion, making herself immune to spirit magic. The other 2 spells were meant to take away most of the advantages an awakened had against a fake mage. Freya had heard many times from her parents about Nalir's abilities, so she knew what to expect. Even with Raging Sun as the opening act, she didn't like their odds. They were still 3 against 4, and no matter how fast he was, Protector couldn't deal with 2 enemies at a time. Yet she didn't hesitate and joined the fray the moment the purple flames dissipated. Blood Desert. Penia tribe. Tazar Quintus home now. Tazar was thinking about how to punish his foolish heir and what gift he could give Lady Tyrus to apologize for Duranial's trespassing inside her territories when the answer presented itself to him. A delicate feminine figure walked out of a dimensional fissure right in front of him. Lady Tyrus, to what do I owe this honor? His voice sounded like someone had put his genitals in a vice. For a second, Tazar's body couldn't decide whether to be aroused or terrified from the apparition. Tyrus's human appearance had a delicate oval face and perfect features. She was 1.76 meters, 5 feet 9 inches, tall, and wore the uniform of a royal constable that fit her like a glove, emphasizing her figure. Her shining golden hair was braided into a waist-long tress. There was no trace of her usual kindness within her silver eyes, so Tazar's common sense made him settle for terror. "Do you really think I'm that stupid?" Tyrus' voice was calm, yet the mana it carried made Tazar fall to his knees and bleed from his eyes and ears. "Your son and his friend trespass, and a mysterious disease appears right in the city they were in. I could have overlooked their blatant violation of my laws if it was just a prank. Yet now it turns out that you sent him to practice forbidden magic on my turf." A wave of her hand made all of the arrays protecting Tazar's home collapse. The artifacts he wore turned into dust, even his prized blood scimitar. "I swear I don't know what you are talking about," he said as his bones started to break one after the other in a symphony of snaps and agony. "You don't know? Then it's even worse. You are so stupid that you didn't even question Duraniel properly. Do you at least know what punishment awaits those who practice forbidden magic?" Her delicate hand lifted Tazar by his head, threatening to squash it like grape. "Death. Who is responsible for a disciple's faults?" Tyrus's voice was unable to hide her anger anymore. Her question was accompanied by a roar of thunder. "Their master." But Duraniel wasn't alone. "Kirin, I've already dealt with Lesalia. Unlike her, you were unaware of your disciple's plan, so I'll grant you a peaceful death." Her reply was the last nail in the coffin of Tazar's hopes. "At least spare my children." He wept. "All but Duraniel." She nodded. "I'll leave them all of your riches and enough books to study magic, if that's what they want. Yet your legacy is mine." Tyrus placed her hand above Tazar's chest and stopped his heart. She waited for his mana core to disappear before moving on the second-to-last item on her to-do list. Duraniel wasn't going to be as lucky as his father. Her only regret was to have wasted too much time with Lesalia. Thanks to the surveillance device she had enchanted Kirin's clothes with, the assassin knew all along what the 6 youngsters were doing. She simply didn't care. To Lesalia, everything and everyone was just a means to an end. She never cared about the Council nor the Guardians. Tyrus had taken her time to show Lesalia how wrong she had been. Zancha's sky now. The few seconds the forbidden formation lasted was enough for Zedros the Wyvern to recognize its nature. I knew it that following Thaluel's disciple was a good move. With this recording, I can blackmail those pathetic humans and their masters to give me everything I want. It only takes a call to the Council to kill them if they refuse. A wide grin appeared on his scaly face. Where is that wormling, though? How can a measly yellow-cored human be so powerful? I smell human treachery here. Zedros wasn't aware of Orion's ring shielding both Lith and Solus, but he knew of the existence of such items. The more the fight progressed, the more he was certain that Lith was using a cloaking device. Meanwhile, several hundreds of meters below the Wyvern, the battle was still ongoing. To come out unscathed from Lith's raging sun, the 4 awakened had to sacrifice something. Pelian's armor was as good as dead, and he had consumed all the barriers he had at the ready. Aelia had sacrificed most of her spells and mana to carve a path for herself out of that blazing inferno. Jaren and Benyo had managed to blink away in time, just to discover that Ryman was able to hit both of them almost at the same time. Curse their magical protections. With just my body, I can't kill them with one hit. I need a weapon. Protector thought. With Tier 5 magic sealed by the proximity of his allies and dimensional magic sealed by life vision, Ryman's options were limited. Keeping 2 awakened busy by himself was the only way he had to give his companions the opportunity to take out their opponents. Otherwise, the enemy would exploit their superior numbers to buy themselves time and use invigoration when necessary. Chapter 586. Ryman assumed a hybrid form over 2 meters tall, which resembled a 2-legged humanoid wolf with feathered wings on his back. He was wearing Litha's prototype of skinwalker armor and wielding an enchanted 2-handed mace. It was another failed attempt at reproducing the Gatekeeper, but it had to do. Protector had never learned how to use weapons. He had dedicated all of his free time to magic. Lith was eager to even the field. He charged at Aelia, who was currently the easiest target while unleashing a barrage of spells to prevent her from escaping. Pelion had the same idea. He blinked behind Freya, having care of remaining outside of full guard's area of effect. His hands were brimming with mana, ready to unleash a spell that she couldn't avoid from such close range. Unfortunately for Pelion, he was well within Dimensional Ruler's area of effect. The golden sparkles of light, which were filling the air, distorted the space and made his dimensional door volatile. Instead of closing, the exit point exploded. The resulting burst of flames burned Pelion's back and threw him off balance. Freya turned around, performing several lunges with her rapier aimed at his vitals. Pelion took his greatsword out of his dimensional ring, and a small explosion almost threw his weapon away. He managed to catch it by infusing himself with air fusion, but the desperate movement left him exposed. The rapier hit him several times, draining Pelion's armor of its last bits of energy before piercing his shoulder. Pelion grunted, using darkness fusion to cut off his pain receptors. Between his burned hand and his wounded shoulder, he wouldn't be able to keep his focus otherwise. A greatsword? Are you overcompensating for something? Freya said with a sneer. Pelion was enraged at the idea of having been hurt by a fake mage twice, yet he managed to keep his cool and unleashed the Tier 4 spell Wendigos Wail. It was an unblockable attack that produced a cone of freezing air mixed with a shockwave. The former would weaken and slow down the enemy, while the latter would stun them long enough for Pelion to deal her a finishing blow. The sparks of golden light coalesced in front of him, forming a warp steps which swallowed the spell and released it right behind Freya's back before dissipating. It all happened so quickly that Pelion was still trying to understand how she could have deflected his spell when Freya resumed her attack. The potion she had taken made up for her lack of fusion magic, while her swordsmanship outmatched the opponent's. She never attempted to block the much bigger and clumsier great sword, if not with her conjured tower shield. Her rapier danced like a snake against Pelion's guard, and every one of her hits created a deep wound. Pelion cursed his bad luck, realizing that even when his attacks landed, they did little to no damage. Now that his armor's pseudo-core had exhausted its energy, the difference in defensive abilities was overwhelming. Light fusion alone wasn't enough to heal his wounds fast enough. Thanks to darkness fusion shutting down his pain receptors, he didn't feel pain, but every new cut was making his stamina deplete faster. He faked a lunge, and the moment Freya retreated, Pelion flew back to buy enough time to use invigoration. Freya lunged too, but despite the distance, she hit her target. The golden lights had coalesced again, forming a small warp steps right in front of Freya's weapon and another at Pelion's back. She kept stabbing the air in front of her, and her blades started to appear out of nowhere from impossible angles, forcing Pelion to use all of his focus just to remain alive. "What kind of monster are you?" he said. Freya didn't reply. She moved forward, making more and more golden lights surround her opponent. Dimensional Ruler was a Tier 5 dimensional magic spell, which used Freya's great mana perception and her talent for space manipulation to open countless small warp steps all around her. It allowed her to perceive anyone warping near her and to make space unstable at will. It was the reason every time Pelion employed a dimensional ability, something had exploded in his face. Freya could also use it as a means of attack or defense, but only within a short range. Like all dimensional spell, it was also very mana expensive, but she knew that time wasn't on their side. They had to get the upper hand quickly, or they would be defeated. Lith and Aelia were fighting in close quarters, and things weren't going well for her. She had come to the fight prepared. Too bad that according to her predictions, it was supposed to be a long-range battle where her group would outnumber and outgun their opponents. After activating Third Eye, Aelia and her companions were supposed to become even stronger, whereas their enemies would be like fish in a barrel after suffering from a damage to their life force they weren't used to. Even the worst-case scenario she had prepared for didn't involve fighting one-on-one at close range. Lith was faster, stronger, and more devious than any opponent she had ever sparred with. If she tried to buy some time to cast a spell, he would exploit her lack of focus to aim straight for her vitals, whereas whenever she focused solely on dodging his attacks, Lith would cast a spell toward her escape route and disrupt her rhythm. "We've been fighting for just a few seconds, and I'm already covered in wounds. Where the fuck are the others?" Alia released all of the attack spells stored inside her rings. The gatekeeper was seconds away from chopping off her head, and she knew it. The sudden barrage of spells forced Lith to step back and dodge, giving Alia a full breath worth of energy from invigoration. Most of her wounds healed, yet the most important thing was that she had regained part of her stamina. Damn it, I was so close to finishing her off. The silver lining is that her rings should be out of energy now. I could use origin flames, but aside from giving away my identity, I would gain no advantage. Back at the church, her barrier withstood protectors and mine combined attack. A simple blast of flames would just surprise her. She's physically weak. I need to exploit it. Lith thought while he blinked away. The moment Alia saw the dimensional door opening, she spun on herself like a top to find its exit point and counterattack. Yet she found nothing. She then watched above and finally below, where Lith had just appeared at dozens of meters of distance. I expected him to stick at close range, but maybe he too is running out of strength. Alia was about to use invigoration again, to not waste a single moment of that unexpected break, when Lith released the Tier 5 spell, Stormnado. The air around him became thick and heavy. Strong gales spread upwards the noxious fumes generated by his hands. Stormnado was a mix of air and darkness magic that conjured a thunderstorm of poisonous gas. Lith had switched his position to make sure that even with its huge area of effect, only Alia would get caught by the ascending toxic tornado he had unleashed. Chapter 587. Please no, Alia said, even though she knew that the ranger couldn't hear her. She was a smart girl. Alia could easily guess what was going to happen. The moment the spell hit her, Lith would be free to cut her down with his swords while she was too busy defending herself from the storm. A mage couldn't be hurt by their own spell, so the ranger could disregard Stormnado's effects and focus solely on attacking. Jaren too understood that her friend had a few seconds left to live. He had no idea how a fake mage could hold her ground against Pelion, but he knew that the moment one of them fell, the rest would soon follow. The Emperor Beast had no skill with his weapon, but each of his strikes had the weight of a mountain. The only time Jaren had blocked with his broadsword, not only did the blade almost break, but the impact also numbed his hands. Benyo, keep him busy. Alia needs help, he yelled as he dived below to the rescue. Benyo released a strong cyan aura and went all out. Up until that moment, Protector's strikes had been shallow because he had to shift his attention from one awakened to the other, but now he could focus solely on her. There's a silver lining in being alone. Here goes nothing. She unleashed a Tier 5 spell, Shattering Star. The space around her was now filled by ice shards as big as a man, each one infused with several lightning bolts worth of electricity. Protector dodged the magical hail like it was moving in slow motion, but then Benyo snapped her fingers and the ice constructs exploded into a heavy rain of smaller crystals. The damage each one dealt was negligible, but they were almost impossible to dodge and sharp enough to cut through Protector's thick fur. They would also release a jolt of electricity so strong that they would cause a seizure even to someone using earth fusion. Protector cursed his naivety and conjured a small tornado around himself to escape from the jaws of death. Shattering Star ended up inflicting him only scratch wounds, but it had never been meant to win the battle, only to stall for time. Benyo smirked at her turtled-up opponent and cast more spells while using invigoration. She considered Emperor Beasts dangerous only because of their physical abilities. Due to their primitive brains, their magic lacked finesse. Or so Benyo thought until she noticed that the tornado didn't deflect the ice crystals, so much as capturing them. She could feel the Emperor Beast's mana flooding her spell and make it his own. The shards grew in size by the second, and so did the electrical current they held. When Protector released half of them, they had become ice lances which moved as fast as bullets. Benyo had no defense that could stop that kind of firepower and was forced to blink away. The moment Protector spotted her exit point, he released the other half while he called the first volley back. Benyo was ready to blink again, but the ice lances hit her barriers like a truck, making her lose her focus. By the time the second volley arrived, all of her protections were exhausted. The first spear pierced through her lung, the second through her stomach, and the third through her shoulder. Each one opened a gaping hole into her flesh, so big that Protector could see through them the events unfolding at Benyo's back. The number of holes in her body increased until it was turned into a burst of blood, skin, and guts. "I'm sorry, but you left me no choice," Protector said as Benyo's remains were scattered to the wind. "I was willing to spare you if you surrendered, yet you kept fighting despite everything was lost. I can't afford mercy when you willingly threaten the members of my pack." Then, he had the wind blow under his wings and turned into a blur. "Alia, blink behind me," Jaren said the moment he was sure that the Emperor Beast wasn't following him. Alia did as instructed, but unfortunately, so did Lith. The two warps opened almost at the same time, making it impossible for Jaren to distinguish friend from foe. Me and my big mouth. Since he couldn't attack, Jaren weaved several barriers in front of himself, just to be safe. Lith had run out of Tier 5 spells, so he had to resort to the Tier 4 spell Death Call. For long arms made of shadow came out of his body, ignoring both of his enemy's defenses. From such a close distance, neither of them could use magic without the risk of harming their partner rather than their enemy. To make matters worse, they soon discovered that, even 2 against 1, they were physically no match for Lith. Both the ranger and his blade were infused with the power of the elements, doubling the effects of fusion magic. After exchanging a quick glance, Alia and Jaren blinked away at the same time, hoping that whoever Lith ended up chasing would buy the other enough time to turn the tables. Pelion wasn't faring any better. Dozens of deep cuts covered his body, and the blood loss was draining his stamina by the second. Dimensional Ruler prevented him from using dimensional magic to escape, and all of his means of attack had been neutralized by Freya's combination of spells. Full Guard allowed her to move her conjured tower shield wherever it was needed, and the golden light surrounding them made her rapier appear from his every side, as if he was surrounded by several opponents. Trying to get at least a second of respite, he unleashed all of the spells he had at the ready and those stored inside of his magical rings. Freya did the same, but whereas she had several means to defend herself, Pelion only had Earth Fusion and his enhanced body. He infused the amulet at his neck with what mana he had left, generating a barrier made of pure energy that saved his life. Freya used her tower shield to block as many attacks as she could before it crumbled, and then she blinked behind her opponent while Pelion was blinded by the light generated by the spells exploding on his barrier. Pelion wasn't naive and was expecting something like that. His enhanced senses alerted him in time. He managed to turn around in the nick of time and block Freya's sword with the hook-shaped hilt of his own. He ripped it off from her hand and used his free arm to grab at her neck. He was now out of mana, making it necessary for him to finish her quickly. Unfortunately, while he so skillfully overpowered her arms, her leg found her way to his gonads. Freya kicked them hard and fast enough to send them keeping company to Pelion's tonsils. With his pain receptors functioning again, he doubled over in agony, and Freya's knee welcomed his face as her elbows struck at the back of his head. Meanwhile, in the sky above Xantia, Zedros was considering the idea of going down and save the 3 awakened youths remaining. If those weaklings die, I will never learn their masters' identities. Dead men tell no tales and can't be blackmailed, he thought. Chapter 588. A small rift opened in the space near Zedros. It was so thin and delicate to be almost invisible. "What are you doing here instead of stopping the ritual?" A feminine voice holding the fury of a storm asked. According to the rules of the council, every lord is responsible for protecting their territory from trespassers and from awakened who employ forbidden magic. Yet you are here not doing anything. Any last words? Lady Tyrus, Zedros attempted to say before her punch crushed every single bone in his body and sent him crashing against the nearest mountain, a couple of dozens of kilometers away. It seems I'm late. Yet the air is still pure. The forbidden ritual didn't succeed, she thought while she descended to the ground. Jaren had gotten the short end of the stick. He had just walked through his dimensional door when Litha's blade lunged at his neck. He managed to dodge it only to be caught by the 4 shadow arms conjured by Death Call. The darkness magic flooded his body, draining Jaren of his vitality. The combined action of the 4 limbs made him lose his focus along with all the spells he kept active or had at the ready. With no more barriers protecting his enemy, Litha's blade had no problems to sever Jaren's head from his neck. Alia was quickly recovering her strength while she cast her strongest Tier 5 spell. She was so focused on the completion of the spell that she almost didn't notice Protector approaching to her position at breakneck speed. This time they were far enough to allow her enhanced senses to spot him thanks to air fusion and life vision. Aelia was about to unleash her collapsing moon spell against the Emperor Beast when two golden rays of light descended from the sky, piercing Aelia's and Pelian's heart. At the same time, Litha's group noticed to be inside an impossible array, which generated a spherical barrier around all of those present, corpses included. This is General Vorga's energy signature, but I don't recognize the one behind the golden rays. Lith thought. It seems the reinforcements have finally arrived, but I don't understand why they put us inside, never mind. Solus's thoughts didn't make any sense to Lith until a huge explosion destroyed the awakened one's corpses and cracked the barriers sealing them. You are lucky, son, General Vorg said. A lot of mages don't want their treasures to be stolen. Sometimes a dead enemy is more dangerous than when they were alive. Lith actually had no such problem. Solus would always warn him if a pseudo-core was going awry, but he had no reason to tell that to Vorg. Thanks for your help, he said while giving him a small bow. Solus preferred to keep her eyes on the magical staff Vorg was wielding and try to understand its secrets. No, Ranger. Thank you. I'm sorry we arrived so late, but casting such a long-range warping array requires time and skill. I suppose you already know Spellbreaker Tyrus Griffin. Tyrus waved her hand at Litha's group while she kept open the dimensional corridor from which Vorg and other spellbreakers were rushing out. Where are the rest of the enemies? Vorg asked. Dead or still inside their homes. Lith handed him the list containing the names of all the officials and nobles who were likely to have helped the Church of the Six to spread its influence. Well, cleaning up this kind of mess is way beyond your pay grade. We'll take it from here. There's anything else I need to know? Yes. I stopped those rogue mages with the help of my friends, and I'd like for them to be compensated. They are Freya Ernas, and Lith turned around just in time to bit his own tongue. Don't worry. The Griffin Kingdom doesn't discriminate against his loyal citizens just because of their race. Both Lady Ernas and the Emperor Beast will be rewarded for their efforts, Tyrus said. Lith had almost noticed too late that Protector was still in his hybrid form. Vorg dispelled his array, making the barrier trapping Litha's group disappear. Who are these guys, Scourge? Friends or enemies? His voice sounded like a snarl. Protector's lips were curled, revealing his snow-white fangs and showing he was ready to resume fighting. Protector was too young to know about the Council or the Guardians. Since Tyrus wanted to appear as a cyan-cored human, even his senses perceived her as such. Friends, Lith said, stepping in front of him and shielding Ryman with his own body. Just to be safe. Freya was still confused about the quick development of the events. At first, she had been annoyed by someone stealing her prey, but when Pelian's corpse had exploded, making even her bones tremble, her rage had been replaced by gratitude. The emotional roller coaster resumed when she saw Tyrus. She had no idea who that constable was, but seeing another Tista was a big blow to her pride. Thank you very much, Lady Ernas. Your family truly is a pillar of the kingdom, Tyrus said while shaking her hand. Thank you for your kind words. Was all that Freya managed to think of that didn't sound like a pickup line. It's never easy to reward an Emperor Beast. Your needs are often very different from humans. I didn't come here for a reward. Just leave me alone, and I'll consider us even, Protector said. There was something off in the woman in front of him, and he didn't like how the other spellbreakers were looking at him. He chose to remain in his hybrid form to not give away his human appearance. If that's your wish, I can promise you that no one will disturb you. I hope you will at least accept some gold as a token of my appreciation. Tyrus handed him a bag containing a few hundred gold coins. Protector was tempted to refuse it, but with another kid incoming, that money would make a huge difference. He wouldn't need to work for a long time, allowing him to focus only on his family and magic. Also, Celia could use a bigger home, and both of them some help with the kids. He nodded at Tyrus and made the bag disappear inside his dimensional amulet after checking that none of the coins was enchanted. What can the Griffin Kingdom do for you, Ranger Verhan? Tyrus shook his hand too, coming a little too close for Litha's comfort. Her beauty was stunning. Her hair smelled like spring had finally arrived, and her smile had melted countless frozen hearts in the past. I would like to apply for leave again. 2 missions completed in as many days and an entire city saved from forbidden magic should grant me at least that much. He replied without hesitation. Tyrus's smile reminded him of Camilla, making him yearn for his girlfriend's company. That's a given. She chuckled. You'll be awarded 10 days leave for your meritorious acts and another 10 days for being the top ranker in the Ranger Corps. I was asking if there's something specific you might desire. Chapter 589. Please, refrain from asking more titles or annuities, because those who rise too fast draw on themselves the wrong kind of attention. Tyrus said. Then I'd like to keep the Baylor's body for myself. Also, I think I'll spend my leave practicing forge mastering. Can you provide me with these metals? Lith handed her a very short list, but each material was accompanied by a big number. I can assure you that all of your requests will be fulfilled, except for the adamant. It's too rare and precious to waste it for the experiments of a novice forge master. No offense. She replied. None taken. What's the next best thing I could receive? Money and orichalcum. Gold is a mage's best friend. Whatever your project is, you'll need it. As for the orichalcum, it's a natural alloy of silver containing traces of adamant. It's the perfect material for most artifacts, and with the proper treatment, it can become harder than steel. Is it good enough for you? Tyrus asked. Yes, thank you very much. I would also like to learn the metalworking techniques you mentioned earlier. I can't depend on Zekel forever, especially for the items I need to create with true forge mastering. Lith thought. Everything will be delivered to your door, but I have to order you to remain here until the situation settles. Tyrus made him snap out of his reverie. Removing so many nobles at once will make the city chaotic. Once Count Cester's treachery gets exposed, the citizens of Xantia will lose much of their trust in the nobles who have failed them, and they will shift it on the heroes who saved them. Your presence will help to make the transition as quick and painless as possible. Lith was happy at the idea of spending some more time with Freya. Leaving right after completing his mission would mean treating her as if she was just a means to an end, whereas she was his friend. I can't believe I'm thinking about this in a non-sarcastic way. Lith thought. One step at a time. Progress, not perfection. Sola said. In her eyes, Lith had many important people in his life, yet he appreciated only a few of them. Solus too was afraid of the possibility that he could die and reincarnate somewhere else. However, what really terrified her was the idea that to achieve his goal, Lith would lose everything and everyone else in the process, making it a hollow victory. I'll take my leave. Scourge, Ernest. Protector opened a warp steps and disappeared. The arrival of the army and all the magic employed during the battle had lured quite a crowd of onlookers. Lith approved of Protector's choice. He had left before more humans could see him and had pretended to not know Freya. I guess that during the past 5 years he has learned some common sense. Lith thought. Freya and Lith had to provide a full report of all the events before returning to Viscount Crame's mansion. They were both starving and craving for some rest. Shouldn't you call Camilla? I bet she's jealous of you spending so much time alone with a gorgeous woman. Freya said during dinner while sweeping her hair behind her ear. Don't worry. Tyrus and I are barely acquaintances. Also, I never remained alone with her, so my reputation is safe. He replied with a sneer. Son of a... Freya didn't like her joke being turned against her and punched him on the shoulder. Pain radiated from her wrist the moment her fist struck him. She had hit softer brick walls. I noticed that you didn't bring any member of your guild with you at the Church of the Six. We could have used some help. Lith said. I know. That's why I had them waiting outside in case things got out of our hands. Yet I couldn't risk them meddling with your play. They would see Protector's beast form and your holograms. As much as it pains me to admit it, I don't trust them with my own secrets, let alone with yours or those of your friends. She sighed. They could have panicked or tried to blackmail the two of you. If there's something I learned during the last year, is that it's better to hire mages from minor academies rather than those from the great ones. The former never got the opportunity to learn a specialization, so they are full of hope and ambition. People like Wyra are loyal and grateful for the opportunity to gather merits. Once she gets enough, she can join the Mage Association and search for a teacher. The latter, instead, are bitter because of their failure at learning any specialization, dimensional magic, or even crystalsmith. Very few of them have the confidence to study again on their own, and their wounded pride prevents them from asking for help. By the way, What was that golden light you used? That guy was huge and used that strange magic, yet you handed his ass to him. Lith asked, how the heck did you have the time to pay attention to my fight? Do you have eyes even behind your head? I was just looking out for you. Lith lied. Solus could see all around them, and then share her memories once a crisis was resolved. That was one of the dimensional spells I created. Even during our time at the academy, I knew I could never be a healer as good as you or Quilla, nor a mage knight as good as Floria. I'm very good at my specializations, but I'm aware I'll always be the vaster of our group. Instead of moping, I realized that I wasn't called Master of Space for nothing. I had my own thing and did all I could to get good at it. Now I'm a full-fledged dimensional mage, like Professor Rudd. Freya was brimming with pride. To her, dimensional magic was just like her guild. Freya was tired of being second in everything she did. She wanted to carve her own path thanks to her talents. Even though the jury was still out on the guild, Freya was certain that dimensional magic would become her true field of expertise. She was explaining to him the effects of dimensional ruler, leaving Lith wondering if he would be able to handle such a spell when the butler entered the dining room. Regent Verhen, Lady Ernest, please forgive my intrusion. Your friend is back and he is asking for you, he said while giving them a deep bow. Most of the house staff was so grateful to both of them for saving the city and their jobs that they treated them better than their own master. Let him in and bring another serving. Lith had yet to finish to speak that Ryman walked through the door with an embarrassed look on his face. The butler did as instructed and left them alone. Did Celia kick you out again, or did you just miss me too much? Lith asked. Neither. I forgot to give you your enchanted items back. Ryman took out both the mace and the pseudo-skinwalker. You can keep them. You already have imprinted them. Plus, they are just failures. Lith dismissed the issue with a wave of his hand. Also, I need a favor. Lith nodded for him to continue while Ryman sat at the table with them. Ryman looked at the great number of silverwares near his plate with wonder. He took a fork and a knife at random, making Freya giggle. Chapter 590. I need a ride back home. Zedros, the lord of the Keller region, must have gone away for some important reason. He isn't home, and he doesn't reply to his amulet. Can you help me, Scourge? Ryman asked. Zedros the wyvern was actually laying on the side of a mountain with most of his bones broken. Tyrus had decided to spare his life, but that didn't mean she was willing to let his act of defiance go unpunished. Not only did her fist crush Zedros' body, but it also had tampered with his life force, making it impossible for him to heal with invigoration. It would take him days to fix the damage his life force had suffered and months to get back to his peak condition. Yes, don't worry. I was going to visit you and Celia anyway. Lith said. The army didn't need their help often, so the three of them spent most of their time relaxing and sharing pointers about magic. Freya had many things to teach them about dimensional magic, whereas Lith had a lot to teach them about everything. How the heck did you learn the basics of all the specializations? Freya had shed blood and sweat to train her 3 specializations. You have your guild, whereas I have no life. Lith shrugged. 3 days later, Lith and Protector left Xantia. Freya was sad to see them go. Protector's kindness reminded her of her father, Orion. It didn't take her long to grow fond of the wise, yet socially awkward Emperor Beast. The two of them warped until they reached the nearest mana geyser. Why are we here? I thought we would take a warp gate. Protector asked. Lith didn't reply as Solus changed to her tower form, allowing them to get inside. It's bigger than I remembered it. Protector looked around the familiar, yet unknown place. What do you mean? It's your first time in here. I expected you to at least be surprised. Lith asked. Your memories, remember? Protector tapped the side of his head with a forefinger. Well, I bet you don't know this. Lith snapped his fingers, and a slight tremor spread throughout the tower. The space around them stretched and deformed as they crossed thousands of kilometers in a heartbeat. By the Great Mother. Protector recognized the all-too-familiar Tron Woods. I can't let the army clerks register all of my movements. If I had to vouch for you to let you use a warp gate, the Griffin Kingdom would easily guess your true identity. I don't have many friends and most of them have free access to gates. Lith said. Thank you, Solus. Protector gave her a deep bow, making her blush. I hope you get a body soon. Fire and stone are not enough to express who you truly are. Whoever did this to you either loved you so deeply that they couldn't stand the idea of losing you, or was a heartless monster. You're welcome, Protector. Solus regretted not being able to show him her physical appearance. She considered Ryman as one of her oldest friends, just like Lith did. I only have one secret, and I'm already sick of it. I don't know how Lith manages to keep so many of them, and honestly, I don't care. I want to come clean with him, she thought. Ryman's home was just a few hundred kilometers from Lucia. It took them just a few minutes to warp to destination. When Lith saw Celia, her physical appearance shocked him. She was supposed to be in her late 30s, yet she looked even younger than the last time he had seen her. She seemed to be barely past her 20s. She was still 1.7, 5 feet 7 inches, meters tall, and her skin was tanned from the years-long exposure to the sun. Her black hair was now longer, reaching her shoulders and giving her more gentle looks. She wore a leather hunting jacket over a green shirt, green cargo pants, and brown hunting shoes with a soft outer sole to limit the noise made while she moved. Lith could tell by her round belly that she was past the 6 months of pregnancy. Her sharp eyes and rough attitude hadn't changed, though. It's about time, she snarled while giving the children in her arms to protect her. Do you have any idea how hard is it to chase around those two pests while I'm bloated like this? Make yourself useful and fix us something to eat while we entertain our guest. Her eyes became much kinder when she looked at Lith. Oh gods, I would have never expected that the famished runt that once came begging at my door for help would get so tall. Give Aunt Celia a hug, Scourge. She extended her arms and embraced him before he could even answer. Scourge, Lith asked. Ryman never calls you Lith, and I think that Scourge is a fitting name for a great hunter. She replied while not letting him go. The house was a mess. Toys were left around on the carpets and furniture. Most of the walls had been scribbled on, and Lith could see the traces of Celia's efforts to scrub them off. Yet it wasn't the chaos reigning in the hallway which gave him the second shock in less than 10 seconds from his arrival. Their home was almost identical to his own. It even possessed most of the enchanted home appliances he had made over the years. Celia, I missed you so much. Especially at Nana's funeral. He returned the embrace the moment he snapped out of his reverie. I missed you too. She sobbed due to the joy of their reunion and the hormonal roller coaster she was experiencing. It's all that Wolf's fault. I wanted to come at your graduation, but he said no. That the time wasn't right, and all that cheese. Celia wanted to swear, but she had learned the hard way how fast children were at copying their parents' bad habits. I don't want to sound rude, but how can you look like this? Why does the house look like this? He asked when she released him from her embrace. It's all thanks to your memories. She gave him a big kiss on the cheek. Not only did you save that wolfhead's life, but you also taught him more about the world and magic than he could ever achieve on his own. I asked him to do for me what you did for Alina, and to make all the cool stuff you do. Balkier's attack had happened during the 3rd trimester of his 4th year at the White Griffin, giving Protector most of his knowledge about regrowing limbs, forge mastering, dimensional magic, and even magic crystals. I can't do all the things you can, but at least I know the basics. Protector squinted his eyes and used a small blast of darkness magic to clean the walls. The moment Ryman let them down, Lilia and Laren ran towards Lith. They were respectively 4 and 2 years old. With Ryman's red hair and Celia's sharp eyes, they were the spitting image of their parents. They seemed to be curious about him, but instead of asking questions, they sniffed him for a while before shape-shifting their hands and bare feet into claws to better climb his legs. No claws with the guests. Get down immediately. Celia's pants were riddled with holes. Now Lith could understand why she was so edgy. If Aaron had magical powers, Alina would have gone insane without his help. Chapter 591. I can believe my memories gave him an edge, but knowing and doing are two different things. Where did you find the mana crystals to make those things? They seem to be made with true magic. Lith projected one of his little brother's favorite fairy tales to keep the children busy. As I already told you, after almost dying by the Valor's hands and receiving your memories, I understood how lacking my magical knowledge was. As soon as Celia and I settled down in our new home, I searched for a teacher. Protector said, just like humans, beasts too don't spread the secret of awakening unless it's strictly necessary to keep the balance among the races. The law is very strict. You can't even awaken your own children if you aren't willing to put your life on the line for them. What do you mean? Lith had no notion of the social rules among the awakened ones. You are responsible for those you share our secret with. If your disciple breaks any law, you pay the consequences along with them. Since awakened ones have a long life, only after a century the bond between master and apprentice is considered broken. It's never hard to know who gifted who with awakening, since no one gives such a gift freely. Also, when the council captures a criminal, they can be very persuasive. Ryman's words made Lith think that Journey would feel at home in the council. Don't you want to be awakened, Celia? Lith asked. Honestly, I don't know. I prefer a good life to a long one. Not to mention that I should start to study magic, and I never had a good relationship with books. I don't know how long Ryman has left to live. To me, outliving both my husband and children is a fate worse than death. She ruffled the kids' hair. They were two little angels now that they had stopped destroying the house, and she wasn't forced to chase them around. Unlike humans, however, we don't hide our identity. I found my master, Faluel the Hydra, simply by asking the magical beasts of the Distar Marquiate for directions. Convincing her to teach me wasn't easy. A disciple takes a lot of time and effort. Being an awakened isn't enough to be accepted by a master. You have to prove to be reliable, talented, and to have an affinity with your future teacher. Because of your influence, I was interested in learning about healing and forge mastering. I had to prove my worth by doing all kinds of jobs for her for almost a year before she took me in. A year? I wouldn't have lasted that long. During that time, I completed half of my studies and I've made a lot of connections within human society. Lith said, an emperor beast wouldn't have taken you anyway. Back then, you were just a human. Even Scarlet considered you a dangerous anomaly. Faluel would have probably chased you away, if not worse. Ryman shook his head. Celia was more interested in Litha's light show than in all that talk about awakened and Litha's nature, which made him wonder. To Celia, Lith asked, what did he tell you about me, exactly? After the scare he gave me with Lilia, I gave him only one condition if he wanted us to get back together. I demanded that there wouldn't be any more secrets between us. He told me all about himself, but he only told me about you what he needed for his story to make sense. I'm fine with it, and I never pried further. He never shared with me your secrets aside from you being an awakened, how the two of you met, and what you did together. Your parents are almost of my same age. We grew together in Lucia, so there's no chance one of them is an emperor beast. They would have never let one of their children suffer from hunger or illness as Tista did. I'm really curious, but if you don't want to tell, it's fine. Just consider that you are unlikely to find someone as open-minded as me, Celia said, pointing at Ryman. Lith hesitated, not knowing to which one of his two hearts he should listen to. On one hand, he was certain that Celia wouldn't be too shocked if he decided to show her his hybrid form. With an emperor beast for a husband and two little shape-shifting wrecking balls born from their love, she had proven to have an inhuman tolerance for weirdness. Yet they hadn't seen each other in a long time. She had helped him a lot before he entered the White Griffin, but they had never got that close. He had never willingly revealed his hybrid nature elf to anyone except for Floria. Showing it to Celia before then to his family or Camilla made him feel bad about himself. Thanks for the offer, but I'll pass. For now, Lith said. Celia dismissed the issue with a shrug and fell asleep shortly after. Her body was aptly trained to rest as soon as the kids allowed her to. What kind of jobs did Faluel ask you to do? Many things. I had to kill rogue magical beasts, human hunters that kept harming her forest, and sometimes even deal with abominations. It sounds like she was making you do her job for her, Lith said. Mostly yes. Each task was actually a test to see if I could be trusted with more power. Not all of those she pointed me at deserved to die. Humans are more complex than beasts. They are so gray that most of the time is really hard to tell if they are bad or just desperate. Lith had the impression that Protector was now talking about him. After winter has passed, come find me. I'll introduce Faluel to you. She seemed to be very interested in your wormling form, and she is an invaluable teacher. Even with your memories, I wouldn't have been able to do any of this without her help. She provided me both the materials and the mana crystals. Protector pointed at all the forge-mastered marvels furnishing his house. What's a wormling? Lith asked. It wasn't the first time he heard that term. A hybrid between one of the draconic species and something else. She thinks you are one of them because of your scales and because you can use dragon fire. Protector replied. I can use what now? Maybe you know them as origin flames. You know, the fire you breathe from your mouth? Not everyone can use them, which makes them special. Do you know why? Lith couldn't believe his luck. He might have found a proper awakened teacher and learn about origin flames, all in one day. Sorry, no. Not even Faluel can use them, so the first time she mentioned them to me was before sending me to Xantia. Lith spent the night at Ryman's home. He studied the pseudo-cores of Ryman's creations to appreciate the difference between his own results as self-taught with those of someone who had a master. It seems I'm really talented for forge mastering. My work is in no way inferior to Protector's, he thought. Before leaving, he exchanged communication runes with Protector and Celia. He also gifted some of his toys to the kids. He had prepared a new set of fairy tales projectors and miniature models. They were shaped like mages and magical beasts and could emit light of different colors as if they cast different spells. Lith could always make more, and Celia needed a way to keep them busy when Ryman was away. Chapter 592. Will you get back to Lucia now? Lith asked, hoping for a positive answer. I don't know. Celia bit her lower lip. I'd love to get some help and company. Living in the middle of nowhere is really tiring, but I have to endure it for the kids. I'll think about it as soon as they understand that they can't shape-shift in front of strangers. She sighed. Celia and Lith exchanged a long hug. She made him promise to come back before the end of winter. Remember that we are your friends, not just a deadline. If you come back only for the lizard, I'll never forgive you. After saying their goodbyes, Lith used the tower warp to get back in the north and reach Belius with the army's gate. He needed to leave enough traces of his passage to never make people wonder where he disappeared from time to time. I would love to work on my forge mastering, but my talk with Camilla is long overdue. I can't delay it any longer without giving her a good reason. I can't just fit her in my spare time. I need to make time for her. He thought while knocking on her door. It was early enough in the morning for her to still be at home, but not so late that she had to rush to work. Lith had the keys to her apartment, but he wanted to make her a surprise. He rang the bell several times before he could hear an angry voice coming from behind the door. Look, pal, whatever you sell, I'm not buying. I was in the middle of breakfast, and Camilla choked on her words after watching through the peephole. I swear, this is the last time I make you a surprise. This is not how I pictured our reunion. The door opened abruptly, and Camilla hugged him tightly for a few seconds, making sure he wasn't hurt. How did you get here so fast? I wasn't expecting you here before noon, she asked. Lith didn't reply. He silently stood there, returning her embrace. He had missed her warmth, the scent of her hair, and even the sound of her voice. The difference between speaking with her and her hologram was like heaven and earth. Is it too much to ask for a welcome home and a kiss? Lith's words made Camilla blush. He had just referred to her house as his own, as if to ask if he could live with her. Welcome home, she said before making him bend down to reach his lips. Come in. I want to hear all about Freya and Ryman. Camilla had no need to ask him about the events in Xantia because she already knew them from his daily reports. She was more interested in learning about his never-mentioned-before friend. They had breakfast together, while Lith told her how he and Protector had met and how he had become his magical father figure. He always referred to him as a vagrant mage. Exposing his identity as an emperor beast could endanger his family. Ryman had not betrayed Lith a secret, and he was willing to do the same for him. Did you really fight together against your first abomination when you were just 12? She asked. Yes. My parents learned about it only a year later. That man is crazy, bringing a child to fight that kind of monster. No matter how much enthusiasm Lith used when reminiscing all the times he had fought or hunt alongside Protector. To her, he was just a nutjob who had endangered Lith's life multiple times. Without me, the Tron Woods would have been destroyed and maybe Lucia razed to the ground. He's not crazy. If we had never met, I would have probably died fighting the abomination alone. Lith said, you can keep trying to make it appear heroic later. I'm almost late for work. Camilla put her jacket on, giving him a last kiss before going to the door. I would love to have lunch together, but I have barely 10 minutes at random due to overwork. I'll be back for dinner. I want you to promise me that when I arrive home, I'll find you here and that you will not risk your life today. She grabbed the handle without turning it, waiting for his reply. I promise. Are you ready for our big talk? Lith asked. I was born ready. She blew him a kiss and left the apartment. Not risking your life is a big promise. What are we going to do all day? Sitting on a couch, Solus chuckled. I'm not tired. I had plenty of time to rest during the last few days. The materials I have requested should have already arrived home. Time to forge master us a few new toys. Lith used Belius's gate to get to Dirios, the capital of Dastar's Marquette, and then Solus's tower warp to arrive directly in the Tron Woods. His parents were overjoyed to have him back home. They showered him with affection and rebukes. This is becoming disturbing, son. Ras said. Why are you only getting missions where you risk your life at least once per day? I'm the ranger in charge of one of the most dangerous regions in the north, Dad. Not the captain of the sewing club. High risks mean high rewards. Speaking of rewards, I was expecting a few crates. Have they arrived already? Yes, dear. I've stored them for safekeeping. Alina handed him several dimensional rings. Are you eating properly? It seems that stress has made you lose weight. Maybe you should change your career plans. Please, Mom. Camilla is already bugging me. She says that I endanger my life like she changes her clothes. I don't need to hear the same song from you and Dad. You should listen to her. Camilla is a judicious woman. Will you have lunch with us? Lith nodded in reply, and then he and Alina came out of their home to pass the crates from her dimensional rings to his pocket dimension. After that, he went to the village of Lucia to meet with Zekel Proudhammer. He was the village blacksmith and Rena's father-in-law. He had insisted for both Rena and his granddaughter, Lyria, to keep the Verhen last name, making them Verhen Proudhammer. Litha's name was the best sword and shield any sane man could ask for. What can I do for you, dear Lith? Zekel loved all the privileges he had acquired through his son's marriage and was always eager to help Lith however he could. I need to make me a few items out of orichalcum. Do you know how to process it? Lith asked. No, I never heard about it outside of legends. Lith took out the first crate and a booklet about orichalcum. I gave it a read. It doesn't seem much different from silver. Is it as easy as it seems? Lith was so used to learn things with Solaspedia that every second that Zekel spent reading the booklet seemed to last an hour to him. We can give it a try? We'll need a few ingredients for. Lith opened the crate, revealing that the ore had been delivered with all the necessary for its treatments. Okay, then we just have to wait for the furnace to reach the right temperature. I'll reread everything again while we wait. Wait. Lith hated that word. It usually implied wasting time he could use to do something else. It took him less than a minute to pulverize the ore with magic, another few minutes to prepare the rest of the ingredient, and then he could only stare at the flames. Chapter 593. Lith already had a copy of the booklet inside Solaspedia, so he had no need to review the procedure again. Zekel had put a dirty silver ore inside the crucible to check the temperature of the furnace. Is it a problem if I use magic to speed things up? Lith asked. Be my guest, but remember that metals can evaporate. Finding the right temperature could require even more time since I know nothing about magic, and you know nothing about metals. Zekel shrugged without taking his eyes off the booklet. Lith sighed. Even fire vision could be useless without proper knowledge. I need to start practicing now, or I'll need months to create even a single item. Here goes nothing. He thought after checking that no one was looking. Litha's throat became covered in black scales as he breathed origin flames inside the furnace. The blue magic flames overpowered the normal yellow ones, spreading an eerie light. What the heck have you done? Zekel jumped off his chair, trying to save the situation. The crucible, the coal, the silver ore, everything but the stones was engulfed in blue flames. Zekel took out the crucible using metal tongs, but even those caught fire. He kept his cool and took the crucible out of the furnace before splashing the tongs in a bucket of water. Is this normal? Lith asked, pointing at the flaming crucible. No, it's not. You should have. Oh gods! Zekel couldn't believe his own eyes. His old, trustworthy tongs seemed now to be made of two different parts. One was blackened with dirt, time, and use, whereas the extremity that had been eaten by the flames was slightly smaller than he remembered it. He touched it with his fingers. He even hit the anvil with them to make sure of his findings. This doesn't make sense. I get that your flames destroyed the dirt, but this? The metal seems to have been purified several times. What about this? Lith used spirit magic to have the crucible float in front of Zekel. The crucible was shiny as if someone had spent hours polishing it, and the silver ore was reduced to a small clump of metal. By the great hammer! I've never seen such pure silver. This is bad, Zekel said. Why bad? Isn't the purer the better? Lith asked. If you want to make an ornament, yes. If you need it for something that has a practical use, impurities aren't all bad. Pure metals are a myth. Sometimes, you have to add impurities to obtain the right balance between hardness and softness. Too much of the former, and the final result will be brittle. Too much of the latter, and it bends just by watching at it. Lith had his doubts, but he couldn't experiment with origin flames in the presence of witnesses. He spent the rest of the morning with Zekel, learning how to smelt the orichalcum and how to turn it from as ductile as silver to harder than Damascus steel. The procedure was relatively simple. First, they picked a crucible big enough to contain quite some ore, but not so heavy that Lith couldn't easily lift it even when full. Zekel covered the bottom of the crucible with a special sand to prevent the ore from sticking. Then he prepared a mixture of ore, wheat flour, lard, and ashes. The flour would provide the carbon for the oxidation of impurities and heat the metal from the inside. The ashes served for both the oxidation and to make the impurities clump together. Much to Lith's surprise, the lard was used to help the ore form in or bar and to help build up the heat. Once the crucible was filled with the mixture, Zekel covered its surface with more ash, sand, and psidium. The sand would prevent the metals from volatilizing, whereas the psidium was a substance necessary to keep the silver and the adamant in the ore together. They put the crucible inside the furnace, and Lith used magic and fire vision under Zekel's supervision to spread the heat evenly until the ore looked like honey with no lumps of unmolten material. After pouring the liquid into a dry mortar, the ore quickly solidified into an upper part made of slag that looked like colored glass and a lower part made of metal. They separated the metal from the slag and repeated the process until it was pure. Only then did they add the last ingredient, darkest con. It would make the adamant saturate the silver, giving to the metal ingot the properties of both metals. After they had treated a few batches of ore, Lith noticed that it was almost lunchtime. "Can we stop here? I need you to make me a few things for me." Lith asked. "Isn't it a bit late for that? You should have told me way earlier. Without a mold, there's not much I can do, and you didn't give me enough notice to prepare anything." "Do you still have the mold for the silver hammers you made me some time ago?" "Sure. Do you need a hammer?" Zekel was surprised by his request. It couldn't be a weapon since Lith only used swords, nor something merely decorative. It would have been a waste of orichalcum, and Lith was as thrifty as he was. "More than one. I need to enchant them, and failure is likely. I also need a chain mail and chain pants of orichalcum. The shape doesn't matter. I'm going to make a better skinwalker armor," Lith said. Zekel had enough time to prepare him a couple of hammers. Everything else had to wait. Zekel would first finish to purify the rest of the orichalcum and then work on the items Lith had requested. Orichalcum is definitely different from other metals, Solus thought. Indeed, it's much lighter and durable of all the hammers we used to far. Lith had struck Zekel's anvil with it several times, yet the metal didn't bend nor did it get scratched. Not that. I mean that it has a very thin mana flow of its own. Solus's words shocked Lith. He activated life vision, noticing that Solus was actually wrong. It's not really a mana flow. Orichalcum seems to be able to draw the world energy and channel it. There's no life force nor mana core. Lith used invigoration to put his hypothesis to test. He discovered that he could now see inside the metal like it was a living being and even spot the residual impurities within. I wonder why we didn't notice that with Zalgrish's forge. Orichalcum is just silver and adamant, whereas the forge he gave us is made of pure adamant. It makes no sense that orichalcum has better properties than adamant, Lith thought. Probably because we were both blinded by all the magic stuff stored inside his lab. The place was about to blow up. We didn't have the time to use invigoration on the forge. Plus, after we escaped, we never took it out from our pocket dimension. Right after leaving Jambel, we came to Xantia. We simply had no chance to give it a second look. Solus replied. It seems we have so much work to do and only 20 frigging days at our disposal. Lith thought. Chapter 594. Lith swung the orichalcum hammer in his hands to check its balance, making Solus green with envy. She yearned to put her hands on it, but as long as she kept her ability to take physical form a secret, Solus could only watch. Aside from being entirely made of orichalcum, the hammer wasn't much different from the carpenter tools with a nail slot Zekel sold in his shop. It consisted of two parts, a straight shaft to hold it, and the head. The head featured the actual hammer and the claw. The design is really poor. Lith sighed. In none of the stories he had read as a kid, an enchanted item seemed out of a well-mert. He was solely interested in its properties, but the mundane look of the hammer made it underwhelming even for him. With no mold at his disposal, there wasn't much Zekel could do. Since we just have to perform experiments, we'll worry about the shape for last. Solus, can you make me a blacksmith lab? Give me a moment, she replied, making the tower rumble for a few seconds. A new door appeared in the basement. Behind it, there was a perfect replica of Zekel's workshop. Lith nodded in approval and looked at his pocket watch. He had 6 hours before he had to be at Camilla's place. Okay, no time to lose. First things first, let's check out our forge. Solus took the adamant forge out of her pocket dimension, allowing both of them to appreciate the vigorous flow of world energy it induced in its surroundings. The adamant was like a magnet for world energy. No matter how good a mana conductor the adamant was, it couldn't contain an indefinite amount of energy. Once it was saturated, the constant stream of new world energy would force the old one stored inside the metal to come out, generating an artificial mana flow. It was a phenomenon very similar to invigoration, when Lith made the world energy course through his body without absorbing it. That way the world energy wouldn't nurture his mana core, but it would replenish his mana and bring his body back to its peak condition. This is interesting. What if adamant is just one of the many metals that don't exist on Earth? What if it's a metal capable of using some kind of accumulation to refine itself over the centuries until it becomes adamant? Lith wondered. He placed his hand over the forge and used invigoration on it. Just like for the orichalcum, he could see inside the block of metal as if it was a living being. To him, the forge appeared as if it was made of light, with very few impurities inside of it. The impurities were thin black veins, tainting the otherwise pristine element. He attempted to take control of the adamant's mana flow to expel the impurities, but they refused to budge even of a single millimeter. Not even Solus's power, boosted by her tower form, managed to do any better. They couldn't risk damaging it, so they put it back inside their pocket dimension and took out a new crate of orichalcum ore. I'm really curious to see if Zekel is right. Maybe with origin flames we can skip the smelting phase and obtain orichalcum faster. Solus proposed. Lith put the ore inside a crucible and made his throat turn into his hybrid form. Wait a minute. He choked on his flames and burned his own mouth. Everything in the tower is part of you. Did you make the crucible or crafted a real one? I made it. Solus's wisp shuddered. With the origin flame's power, she had been seconds away from a world of pain. After Lith made a makeshift crucible from clay with earth magic, he put it inside the furnace and breathed a small jet of origin flames. The crucible held, but Lith could see it getting thinner, forcing him to add new clay that would immediately ignite as well. Solus had to use a few arrays to keep the flames in check and prevent them from attacking the furnace too. Origin flames are hungry little critters. If I'm not careful, they would spread everywhere, she said. When the fire went out, the results were appalling. The clay had turned into high-quality ceramic, which was useless to them, whereas the over 10 kilograms of ore had disappeared, leaving only a few droplets of silvery metal. The good news is that's pure adamant. The bad news is that there is so little that I can't even make a ring out of it. Sure, if I sacrifice a few crates I could get an adamant ring, but to what end? I have no blueprint for powerful rings. It would only be a waste of precious material. I don't know how much orichalcum we'll need to make the improved version of the Skinwalker armor. 10 kilos is already a huge hit. Lith sighed. Let's work on the hammer, then, Solus said. Their aim was to forge master a tool that would improve all of their future works. The idea was based on their studies on true forge mastering when they were still at the White Griffin Academy. Back then, Lith had been forced to use a hybrid technique using both fake and true magic to forge master his creations, but now he could rely solely on the latter to step up his game. During his research, he had devised 2 possible ways to create superior magical items with true forge mastering. The first required for him to shape the pseudo-core outside its future recipient and then merge them together before creating the necessary mana pathways to make it permanent. The second one, instead, would have him create both a small pseudo-core and thin mana pathways at once. Lith had to infuse both of them with more energy until they reached the desired size. Each method had its pros and cons, at least on paper. By creating a complete pseudo-core, Lith had all the time he wanted to shape it with surgical precision and charge it with enough energy to fuel the effects he wanted to achieve. The downside of such a method was that injecting such a big energy mass inside inanimate matter would encounter a lot of resistance and put a huge amount of stress on its recipient. If he wasn't careful, most materials would shatter due to a mana flow too strong and sudden for them to handle. To make matters worse, the pseudo-core was likely to be deformed in the process, and fixing it would require to inject even more mana, adding even more stress on the material. Only then could Lith try to create the mana pathways necessary to stabilize the pseudo-core. Too few and the mana would be dispersed, too many and the item would crumble. Creating a small pseudo-core and mana pathways at the same time, instead, would allow Lith to pile up the mana inside its recipient one bit at the time. It would give him the opportunity to not exceed the limits of the chosen material and fix any errors he might make in the early steps during the later stages. The main problem of this method was that any late mistake couldn't be fixed. Also, developing all of the mana pathways along with the pseudo-core at the same time was very demanding in terms of mana and focus. Chapter 595. Lith had dubbed the two methods as Necroforge and Bloomforge respectively. The former followed the same pattern Lith used to create his lesser undead. Back in Xantia, his plan involved keeping a perfect blood core at the ready along with Trouble's corpse. An undead Baylor was the perfect way to beat numbers with raw power. Unfortunately, powerful corpses crave for the necromantic energies of a blood core and had no need for mana pathways, whereas inanimate objects rejected magic. The latter method was derived by Lith's studies on the growth of the pseudo-cores of mana crystals and of the mana core of plants. Once again, the main difference was that inanimate objects had no core nor room for growth to begin with. Let's start with Necroforge. Lith said. With a bleeding wallet, Lith took 2 cyan mana crystals out of his pocket dimension. He couldn't use blue crystals for a mere test run, nor he could risk using weak green crystals and fail just because he was a cheapskate. He used Invigoration to fill his body with mana. Then he drew several runes in the air to perform the true magic version of bonding. It was a Tier 5 Forge Master spell that was used to fuse together mana crystals and items before enchanting the latter. Once fused with inanimate objects, mana crystals would grant them a mana circulatory system, of which they were the literal beating heart, and an innate mana flow akin to a living being. Each rune produced a mana filament as thin as a hair that would go through both the hammer and the mana crystals, bringing them closer and closer at each passage until they became one. The 3 objects started to float in mid-air, orbiting around each other like triplet stars. Lith had performed this process countless times. Each one of the magical home appliances or toys he made was fueled by mana crystals. He would consume low-quality materials, make his family happy, and gain a lot of experience. 3 birds with 1 stone. Then, it was time to create the pseudo-core with Necroforge. Even though Lith was a master at energy manipulation, shaping a complete core was something that only an awakened could do. Cores looked like spheres of energy, but they were so much more. Thanks to necromancy, Lith had learned that a blood core defined how strong the undead would be if it would retain any memory or conscience, and even the abilities they would be born with. Creating a core, no matter if a pseudo or blood one, was akin to create a whole living being. The purpose of the hammer is to act as a temporary vessel for my mana. The problem of Forge Mastering is that the stronger the spell you want to infuse an item with is, the greater the amount of mana that you need to succeed. If the maximum amount of mana a Forge Master can handle is 100, their limit is a spell with a mana cost of 99. With this hammer, my limit might expand up to 150 while Forge Mastering enchanted items. It needs a simple but powerful pseudo-core with the sole purpose of storing mana. Lith thought. He shaped the pseudo-core to resemble his own, but without all the complex patterns that linked it to his body. Thanks to Invigoration, Lith could look at his own mana core anytime. Whenever he spotted a mistake or an imperfection, he needed but a thought to correct it. Next came the hard part. Even though Orichalcum seemed to accept the pseudo-core as a thirsty man yearns for spring water, even with the mana vessels creating a complex system capable of evenly distributing the incoming energy mass, Lith felt the core distorting the moment it made contact with the hammer. The orichalcum allowed magic to circulate almost freely, But the energy signature of the crystals rejected the foreign mana the pseudo-core was made of. It was like transplanting an organ from a random donor and then beat the patient's body into submission to prevent graft rejection. Lith took things slow and easy. He made the pseudo-core slowly enter the hammer to have the time to spot and correct any deformation as soon as they formed. At the same time, he flooded the hammer's mana vessels with his own mana. It reduced the resistance the core encountered by both weakening the opposing flow and improving the affinity the orichalcum had for Lith's mana. The process required an enormous amount of energy that only an awakened using invigoration could afford. Once the core was at the center of the mana circulatory system, Lith created the mana pathways. With each pathway he completed, the two different kinds of mana started to freely flow into each other until they merged into a single entity. When the process was over, Lith was covered in sweat. "I just want to take a bath and sleep. I used invigoration so much that my entire body aches." The silver lining is that the procedure succeeded. Lith said, "Well, imagine how hard it would have been without me fueling the magic circle in your stead. This is just a prototype, so I wouldn't count my chickens before they hatch." Solus said, "Why so negative? Everything went smoothly, and now all we have to do is to use the orichalcum hammer to forge master something to check its performances." "I suppose we could do that. You always have a lot more time when you are single," Solus said while making the pocket watch float in front of Lith. 6:30 already? Why didn't you tell me earlier?" Lith blurted out. "We were in the middle of a 6-hour-and-a-half experiment. I don't think you would have gracefully thanked me if I made you lose your focus." Lith had barely the time to imprint the hammer to check if it worked, take a quick bath to wash away the stench of sweat, sulfur, and all the smelly stuff he had used at the smithy before warping for his life to get at Camilla's home. "Thank my paranoia for cleaning her apartment before leaving and for storing all the dishes from our favorite restaurant in my pocket dimension before starting my experiments," Lith said to himself while he set the table and made all he could to not make it evident that he had just arrived. Even though he had used invigoration after the bath, he needed to use it again to stop panting. He was at his second breath worth of energy when he heard the key turning and the door opened. 7 sharp. Camilla really is a military woman. I never thought the day would come where I would wish for my girlfriend not to be on time, Lith thought. Camilla looked at the dim lights and the steaming food on the table with a radiant smile. She put her military cap on the coat hanger in the hallway before asking to Lith, "You are here, so you kept at least half of your promise. Did you risk your life today?" He thought about it for a couple of seconds before answering. "No. Worst case scenario, I would have wasted a lot of money and materials." "Then you kept your promise and made my day." Camilla put her arms around his neck before giving him a passionate kiss. Chapter 596. "You're really sweet, but you didn't have to prepare so much stuff. We are going to have a big talk, not a romantic date," Camilla said. She would have liked to take a shower and change her clothes, but Belius's arrays made it impossible to use dimensional magic. Once outside the pocket dimension, the food would get cold. Even if Lith could reheat the delicacies with magic, they would still lose part of their flavor. "We haven't seen each other for so long that we could as well take it as a date. My past is ugly, a bit complicated, and with a sprinkle of mortal danger, but it's all in the past. You aren't going to break up with me, are you?" Lith's paranoia got knocked into 12th gear, making her laugh. "Gods no. I would be a monster to do something like that after how I welcomed you back home this morning. It's just that I know a lot of bad things happened when you were at the academy. To be honest, I have a gloomy story to tell as well." Camilla sighed. "Do you want to go first?" Lith asked while pouring her one of Makosh's finest beers. "No way. I've waited too long for this. You first." Lith told her about his early days at the White Griffin Academy and how he had unpleasantly met those who he now called friends. He was surprised to discover that once he removed the magical jargon, there wasn't much to tell. At least until he talked about Kaduria's plague first and then Balkir's attack. Camilla wept when she learned about Protector's struggle against death to entrust his last words and love to Lith. She had to stop eating to hug Lith when he explained to her at what cost he had saved the life of his friend. Camilla still didn't like the idea that Ryman had endangered Lith's life so often, but after realizing how deep their bond was, she started to like him simply because of his love for Lith. "Okay, that's enough for now," Camilla said after Lith finished to tell her about the 4th year. I've consumed a lot of tissues for bulkier already. If we get to nailier, I don't think I would have the strength to continue our conversation. They had finished eating from a while, switching from beer to red wine. I really need to wash my face, but at this point, I might as well take a shower. I'll slip into something more comfortable while I'm at it. Go easy with the wine. I don't want to find you asleep when I get back, Camilla said. As she closed the bathroom door, Lith moved the dirty dishes in the kitchen, dimmed the lights, and shape-shifted the skinwalker from the uniform into the black suit they often used for their romantic role play. Then, he took the dessert out of the fridge. Gods, I really didn't miss this part. See you later. Solus grumbled while she cut their mind link and hid in a corner of her own mind. Unfortunately for Lith, Camilla did slip into something more comfortable. A loose shirt and pants she used when she was home alone. Even her hair was fixed in a makeshift bun. Pervert. I told you I had a sad story to tell. How could your mind go straight to sex? She wanted to sound angry, but she failed to repress her silvery laughter. Shower plus something comfortable equals sex. Math never failed me before, Lith said without even trying to hide his disappointment and making Camilla laugh harder. You're incorrigible. She sat on his lap, embracing him and giving him a short kiss before going back to her seat. Is it better now? Camilla asked. Can you at least keep your hair down? Lith turned up the lights. No, I want to make sure that you listen to my words instead of staring at my face. She chuckled. She actually needed quite a bit of willpower to prevent herself to skip the conversation and go straight to bed. Talking about Xenia was sad, painful, and somewhat embarrassing for Camilla. Not because of her sister's handicap, but because what she had to ask for him made her feel vulnerable. Also, Camilla knew how the request would sound to Lith's ears. Like an attempt to exploit him. No matter his answer, she knew that by simply speaking those words their relationship would change. She was afraid because when things changed in her life, usually it was for the worse. It would be so easy to avoid the topic and pretend that nothing's wrong. These last weeks have been so hard, always thinking about how I can help Xenia in case she decides to divorce. Being overworked and lonely only made things worse. I missed him a lot, and now that Lith is back, I only wish to cling to him and lose myself in his embrace. Yet it would mean running away from a problem I don't want to face. Xenia has already suffered for too long. If I keep not doing anything for her, now it wouldn't be because I'm helpless, but because I'm an egotistical coward. She thought. Camilla told Lith about Xenia, this time in detail. She explained to him her sister's current predicament as a prisoner in her own house, the cheating, the domestic abuse on her and the children, everything. Lith's eyes turned into fiery slits brimming with mana as Xenia's story resembled more and more his own. His Earth father, Ezio McCoy, among his many flaws was also a cheater. Back when Lith's name was still Derek, he had once found an email his father had sent to his lover, where he professed her love to her and her children. Lith had no idea why they had later broken up, but he never stopped resenting his father for giving his affection to someone else's kids while he treated so badly his own. His inner turmoil drew Solus's attention, who quickly returned fearing something really bad had happened. Damn it, that was unexpected. She thought after checking Lith's most recent memories. There's no need to get angry. Camilla had no way to understand the rage in Lith's eyes. She misunderstood it as aimed at her for trying to exploit his magic with a sob story. Lith's reaction hurt Camilla deeply and made her think that, if he believed her capable of such a thing, he must have had a low opinion of her. I'm not asking you to do it for free. I have enough money to cover even Manohar's fares. Her voice was calm but cold, like when she spoke to Lith as his handler instead of his girlfriend. Wait, what? I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at that F. Lith then demonstrated to have an extensive vocabulary and a venomous tongue. The streak of insults lasted for several seconds. The teaspoon in his hand was now reduced to a small ball of metal. The twisted metal was both a source of shock and relief for Camilla. Relief because it proved her the sincerity of his words, and indignation. Shock because she knew Lith was strong, but she had never witnessed how strong he actually was. As for the treatment, I can't make you any promises. Body sculpting is a very complex discipline, and I didn't practice it ever since I quit my job as assistant professor. Worst case scenario, I'll find you an expert. Lith said. Chapter 597. Don't worry, both Xenia and I know a lot about it. Camilla held Lith's hand, moved by his words. Usually, Healers had God complex. Hearing him admitting his own limits was proof of how seriously Lith was considering the matter. The real problem will be convincing her to get treated and how to deal with her husband. I can assure you the latter will not be an issue. Lith had a psycho-killer smile that gave Camilla the creeps and forced Solus to step in. You are Lith Verhen now, not Derek McCoy. You have no known reason for a personal vendetta against that kind of man. You are scaring Camilla out of her wits. She thought. Lith snapped out of his bloody daydreams and noticed his girlfriend's distress. He took a deep breath and wore his best mask for the occasion. Sorry, I got carried away. Still, dealing with a dirtbag is easy, but if the patient doesn't want to be treated, there's nothing I can do, he said. Camilla sighed in relief. He was back to be the person she knew and loved. She even felt flattered for him taking her sister's situation personally. I know. That's why I want you two to meet. Maybe Zinnia will change her mind if she knows that her healer doesn't think of her as just a number on his personal record. Are you free tomorrow morning? She asked. I wish. I'm in the middle of a bad case. I had to beg my supervisor just to get a few hours leave. Once we are done with Zinnia, I have to rush back to work and we will not see each other before dinner. Camilla's shoulders slouched. She had long since dreamed of becoming a royal constable, yet between the training and the field work, she was already missing her job as an army handler. The pay was average and the work repetitive, but at least it usually left her quite a bit of free time. Then go to bed. You need some rest. I'll join you as soon as I'm done with the kitchen and a long, cold shower, Lith said while plates and cutlery floated in mid-air to be cleaned by a mix of soap, water, and darkness magic. Thank you very much. You have no idea how much freeing my sister from that monster's clutches means to me, she said while hugging him tightly from behind. I know it all too well. Lith could feel his rage trying to manifest outside his mind, but he kept it at bay and said, There's no jury in the world that would convict me if I pounced on you now. It would be a clear case of self-defense. Pervert. Camilla chuckled as she gave him a good-night kiss before disappearing in the bedroom. She really did feel very tired, but the worst thing was that things had already changed. Whatever I do, I'm afraid that Lith might think that I'm bribing him with sex or sweet talk. Gods, I'm so happy he agreed to help us, yet I'm so scared about how things will turn out. Camilla's stomach was churning out of stress. You did well not suggesting her to kill this Falmug guy. I think it would have scared her to death. Remember that a lot of people have a problem with your switch personality. Solus thought before asking, Why are you taking so long with the shower? To give Camilla the time to think, and me an excuse to think she is already asleep. This is not how I pictured my first date with her after my return. This is damn awkward, Lith thought. Lith was regretting both his earlier attempt at seducing her and his stupid sex jokes. But back then he had no idea Zinnia's situation was that bad. He thought it was just an unhappy marriage. Tomorrow I'll need your help to not level the neighborhood. Don't worry, we'll deal with this problem like we always do. Together, Solus thought. The following day, city of Zillida. Lith and Camilla reached the Sarda household in a matter of minutes after walking through the city warp gate. His flight spell brought them quickly to their destination. Zillida wasn't located in the Keller region nor the Distar Marquiate, so Lith had no authority as a ranger nor as a baron there. It was the reason he was wearing the deep green robe that identified him as a great mage. Power was something that even the most stupid people respected. You have no idea how much I'd like you to go full other on them, but I can't afford to play hero. Whatever we do, it will be Zinnia to pay the consequences, Camilla said after looking at Lith's stern face. He was wearing the same expression he had while fighting Thrud's meat puppets, and even though it was addressed against her, his bloodlust was almost tangible. Don't worry. I came here to visit a patient and kick ass. And I'm all out of patience, Lith replied, making her laugh. Camilla stepped forward and knocked on the door. It was her problem, so it was up to her to face it. Vilna, the housemaid and current mistress of the master of the house, was surprised seeing Camilla come back so soon. Her expression turned into a smug grin as she prepared to repeat to Camilla her master's words. Then, she went pale and chalked on her rehearsed speech, leaving Camilla flabbergasted. I'm back to see Lady Sarda, Camilla said while wondering why the housemaid stood there with both her eyes and mouth wide open. She had no way to know that a huge mass of spirit magic was slithering around the housemaid, making it hard for her even to breathe. The pure and unbridled killing intent it was imbued with made the experience utterly terrifying. Litha's eyes returned to normal when Camilla turned around to check on him. During that short moment of respite, Vilna's survival instinct took the wheel. "Please, come in. Lady Sarda is in the tea room, like always." She handed to Camilla her master key. "Thanks. You don't need to accompany us. I know the way." Camilla walked double time, eager to check on her sister. Yet Lith remained behind, never averting his eyes from the maids, even when the door suddenly closed behind him by itself. "I usually don't prey on the weak. It's cruel and pointless since you have nothing I want. Yet if you stand in my path, if you do anything to harm those close to me, I will end you." Lith raised his hand slowly as if he was about to grab her throat. Vilna was paralyzed by fear, almost suffocating due to the mana that pressed on her from every side. "Feel free to eavesdrop or call your master. Becoming a great mage means receiving a royal pardon. All I need is a good reason to use mine." Those words sent a hot liquid trickling along Vilna's legs. It wet her shoes before forming a stain on the carpet. Chapter 598. As Vilna realized the mortal danger she was in, tears filled her eyes, forcing her to blink. When she opened them again, Lith had disappeared as if she had been talking to a shadow the whole time. "Please, be nice to her. Zinnia went through a lot, and I think that bastard of Falmug might have taken it out on her after my last visit. Let me do the talking," Camilla said, too worried to notice that she was alone. "Don't worry. You lead, and I'll follow." Lith blinked behind her. Thanks to his enhanced senses, he had no problems hearing her words from a distance. Camilla unlocked the door, hating that house more with each passing second. The tea room was exactly as she remembered it. A mix of order and hypocrisy. The white sofas and armchairs looked like they had never been used. The center of the hardwood table in the middle of the room had been carved out and replaced by a crystal slab. The vases decorating the room along with white cotton doilies were still there, yet all the flowers had disappeared. Zinnia was sitting on the same chair she had used during Camilla's last visit. Her face was turned toward the sunlight coming from the glass-paneled east wall, as if she was looking at the sky. "Zin, I'm back," Camilla said. "Cammy, you shouldn't be here. The last time Falmug was so enraged by how you strong-armed Vilna to enter the house that now he doesn't buy me flowers anymore. Why do you insist on making my life miserable?" Zinnia said. Her voice was filled with sorrow, and it cracked before she could finish her phrase. "Don't say that, Zin. You have always been a terrible liar. What did he do to you?" Camilla ran to her sister, hugging her. They both wept, bringing to Litha's mind the memories of when he and Carl did the same after one of them had suffered a heavy beating. "Forgive me, Cammy. I didn't mean those things. I just want to hear my children again." Memory and reality overlapped as the ground trembled. For a moment, I hated her because she reminded me of my mother, always whining about how giving birth ruined her life and blaming us for Ezio's behavior. When she accused Camilla, I thought she meant it, but she had just been instructed about what to say. He thought. He beats her legs so that even if they have guests, they can't notice the bruises. That's why she didn't stand up during your last visit, Lith said with a stone-cold voice as he turned around. Camilla noticed his gesture and lifted Zinnia's gown up, revealing many black and blue spots shaped like a horsewhip. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice full of shock and fury. "My brother, Orpel, would do the same thing to me when I was a child." Camilla lowered Zinnia's gown, allowing Lith to get close to her. "Zinnia, this is Lith Verhen, my boyfriend. Lith, this is Zinnia, my sister. Nice to meet you. Do you mind if I heal you?" Lith needed all the help Solus could give him to take the edge off his voice and not raise the house to the ground. "The pleasure is all mine. As for the healing, please help me." Lith chanted a quick gibberish before placing his hand on Zinnia's shoulder and using invigoration on her. All of her bruises and injuries disappeared. He found some poorly healed fractures and fixed them too while he checked her condition. "You really are as good as Cammy says. It's been ages since I had no difficulties breathing." The naive happiness she expressed while blurting out the gravity of the damages her ribcage had suffered made Camilla go pale and Lith grit his teeth. "This is wrong. No one should be happy just because they stopped suffering. That's not life," Lith thought. "I have bad news, Camilla. Zinnia's problem doesn't lie in her eyes. She completely lacks the optic nerve." "The what?" both sisters asked. Most healers knew nothing about anatomy, let alone layman. It links the eyes to the brain. Without it, one cannot see. It's a big problem, like missing a whole arm. I hoped your sister's case would be simple, but for something like that, I need to consult an expert. I won't mess with Zinya's brain until I'm 100% sure I know what I'm doing. I never said I want to be treated. Zinya's voice was full of fear. Really? Do you want to stay here? With that man? Lith was angry, but Zinya wasn't afraid of him. His outrage wasn't cruel like that of her husband. It sounded more like a fellow victim who had yet to give up on hope. He took your children away from you, your legs, and your sister. How long will you allow him to feast on your soul? Nonetheless, his words hurt. Tears streamed down Zinya's face again, and Camilla put herself between them. Zin, I know I'm asking a lot of you, but please, reconsider your decision. Lith went a little overboard, but he isn't completely wrong. Before you had no choice, whereas now I'm offering you one. We have waited for a long time, but things only got worse. Falmug got worse, his violence always escalating. I've lived the past few years afraid to receive a call telling me that you died at his hand. If you can't find the strength to do it for yourself, do it for the kids and for me. Camilla said, I know you're right, Cammy, but I'm too scared. What if Lith fails? Even worse, what if he succeeds? Zinya asked. We'll think about it when the time comes. Right now, all I need is your consent. I need to know that you are willing to fight this battle with us. Be honest with me, Cammy. Is this world really worth fighting for? Or is Moger just full of misery? I never understood how people like me can be born just to suffer, whereas people like Falmug are free to destroy everything they touch without suffering any consequence. I'm too old and too tired to fight, Cammy. It's not worth it. Zinya shook her head. Yes, Moger is unfair. Every world is unfair. Lith said with a stone-cold voice. The only way to survive is to make life unfair to your advantage. If you don't fight for yourself, no one will. He placed his hands to the sides of Zinya's head, activating 2 Tier 5 light magic spells, Scanner and Chisel. He used the tendrils of mana chisel created to connect the life force of her brain with that of her eyes, using mana as a temporary conduit. Zinya's pupils moved around the room as light and colors flooded her vision. Zin, said a beautiful woman in front of her. Zinya couldn't believe her own ears. The woman sounded like her sister. She raised her hands, touching the woman's face and recognizing her on the spot. Is that really you, Cammy? Zinya asked. Yes, Zin. It's me. I've brought you your favorite flowers. Camilla took a bouquet of fresh silver wattles out of her dimensional amulet. Their vibrant scent filled her nose, and their color was a marvel to her eyes. Chapter 599. Zinya started to cry again, but this time out of joy. She appreciated even her newfound vision turning blurry because of tears. Anything was better than the eternal night she had been trapped in. Zin, only you can decide if Moger is worth fighting for. Even at your age, there are so many things you can still experience. There are so many things that I want to share with you. I won't force you to do anything. Just know that no matter your choice, I'll always be by your side. Camilla said. Zinya turned her head to look at Litha's face. She didn't know much about magic, but she had guessed that the moment he would remove his hands from her head, she would lose her sight again. Your trick is quite a low blow. How can I say no after you showed me all this? After seeing the pain and anguish in Cammy's face? Yet I'm grateful you did it. I've been stuck in this cage for so long that it had trapped even my mind. If you think you are likely to succeed, I'd be grateful to have you as my healer. You are the first man I've ever seen, so I have no idea if you are handsome or not. Yet the way Camilla describes you fits like a glove. You're terrifying and kind at the same time. Zinya said. I'll take that as a compliment. If there's one thing you have to learn is that in life there's no such thing as a low blow. Only victory and defeat. Prepare for my next trick. Lith conjured an ice mirror in front of Zinya to allow her to watch at her reflection. Is this my face? She said. I'm so pale and thin. I must look terrible. Zinya moved her eyes from the mirror to Camilla, trying to make a comparison. Believe me, for someone in your situation, you look gorgeous. Camilla said. I just wish the children were here. I'd give everything to see them, even just once. Zinya sighed. First things first. Lith took a piece of paper out of his pocket dimension. This is the legal form that grants me the status of your personal healer. I'm aware you are illiterate, so you can just draw an X where Camilla points you to. Then, we'll need 3 witnesses. Cammy. Camilla ran out of the room with a huge smile on her face. I can't believe Zin accepted to get treated so fast, nor that Lith would bring a legal document that grants him the authority to protect her. This is all too good to be true, she thought while knocking to the neighbors' doors. It took her less than a minute to come back with 2 men and 1 woman. They all signed the document, and then Camilla showed Zinnia how an X was shaped. Just a few words before you leave, Lith said while never leaving Zinnia's side. If you think even for 1 second to go back on your word and deny to have signed the document, remember this. The moment you do that, you'll become my enemies and I'll treat you as such. If anything happens to Lady Sarda, I'll hold you responsible for it in front of the law and the Mage Association. His voice was calm, yet the 3 started to shake uncontrollably. Lith wasn't using killing intent to not scare Camilla, but his gaze was more than enough to scare normal humans to death. There was no warmth in them, just a silent promise of pain. They nodded and gave him a deep bow, their heads almost touching the floor before rushing out of the door. I'm sorry, but I can't keep the spell up any longer without the risk of hurting you. Your body can't handle so much mana at once, Lith said, waiting for Zinnia to nod before he interrupted his spells. Since everything had been settled in a matter of minutes, they had the time to enjoy tea with some pastries together. Camilla loved seeing her sister's real smile, instead of the fake one she had worn during her last visit. Seeing Zin eat and talk so much filled her heart with happiness. All of her questions about their personal life, especially as a couple, not so much. Oh gods, I've never introduced one of my boyfriends to her before. This is so embarrassing, she thought while Lith dodged a question about having children. When they left, Camilla was still on cloud 9. There were so many things that she wanted to tell Lith, but there was no time. He had to warp them to the city's warp gate to not make her arrive late at work. I'll see you tonight, she said with a radiant smile before leaving. Lith called the greatest expert of body sculpting he knew, Professor Zogar Vaster. What a pleasant surprise, Lith. What can I do for you? Vaster replied immediately, as always. Unlike Manohar, he often did freelance jobs, and unlike Manohar, he was reliable. Lith has learned everything he knew about body sculpting from him, and he had seen Vaster perform miracles with that spell. Lith explained to him the situation and requested his help. I would be glad to help, but you caught me in a bad moment. The academy is about to open, and I'm swamped preparing my lessons and filling old paperwork. Can you wait for a couple of days? I should be free by then, Vaster said. Yes, of course. Thanks for your help, Professor. I'd like to show you the patient's status. I think it might help you understand her problem. Lith placed his amulet on a table and started to focus. He conjured a real-size hologram of Zinnia's head, peeling off 1 layer at a time until only the eyes, the brain, and the skull remained. Good gods, that's almost as good as visiting the patient in person. Almost, Vaster said while recording everything to look at it later in detail. It's a difficult case indeed, but it's treatable. I'll send you all the reading material my assistants can find. The rest I'll explain to you in person. Vaster hung the call. Lith informed Camilla and then went back to Lucia. I've done all I could for Zinnia. I've even alerted the local authorities of her situation and added her to my patient list at the Mage Association. I have a lot of free time until evening. Time to try Bloomforge out, he thought. Zekel was still smelting the first batch of orichalcum, so there wasn't much else Lith could do. He wanted to put to the test both the forge mastering techniques he had created before working on the new Skinwalker armor. One of them is bound to be better than the other. Another thing I could do is a replica of Orion's cloaking ring. That way Solus and I could move separate ways when necessary without anyone noticing her. Excellent idea. Yet isn't an orichalcum ring wasted for a single spell? She asked. No, if it allows us to make a better and more powerful ring that completely hides your life force. Safety is priceless. Once they got back inside the tower, Lith took out the second hammer and performed the bonding spell to fuse it with 2 cyan magic crystals. Only when the mana circulatory systems of the hammer had stabilized did the real forge mastering begin. Chapter 600. Bloomforge was the polar opposite of Necroforge. Instead of creating a perfect pseudo-core from the start and merge it with its host, Lith would create a small pseudo-core and the mana pathways necessary to prevent it from dissipating at the same time directly inside the hammer. It was supposed to require less focus and mana compared to Necroforge. The mana pathways would allow Litha's energy to mix with that of the mana crystals during the forge mastering process. It would reduce the resistance that the pseudo-core experienced when interacting with the mana vessels, and by starting small, all mistakes Lith might make could be tweaked as he shaped the core. Bloom Forge was far from perfect, even in theory. Lith had already predicted that the more the forge mastering process progressed, the more difficult things would become. Neither the pseudo-core nor the mana pathways could exceed their ideal form. Bloom Forge had a threshold past which any mistake would mean an unredeemable failure. Necro Forge's difficulty peaked at the very beginning of the forge mastering process, when Lith was at his prime, and decreased as the pseudo-core merged with the item. Bloom Forge, instead, would start easy and become harder with every next step. The second issue was that taking care of the pseudo-core and the mana pathways at the same time would require a lot of focus from Lith. Since he would only grow more tired with time, he would face the most delicate steps while he was at his weakest. "Are you ready, Solus?" Lith asked. "Ready," commencing to power up the mana circle. The space around their forge was surrounded by a blue pillar of light. It was made of the world energy Solus extracted from the mana geyser below them. Lith positioned the orichalcum Wellmert hammer on the center of the obsidian table that was his mana forge, and then placed his open hands at the sides of the hammer's shaft, so that his palms touched a mana crystal each. He used true forge mastering to create a pseudo-core the size of a pinhole and several mana pathways as thin as hair. At the same time, he activated invigoration to check the development of his experiment and be able to look at his own mana core, using it as a blueprint. So far it's much easier than I expected and better than Necroforge. Lith thought. I just need to take things nice and easy. The core has already started to exchange mana with the crystals, making it easy to expand. By simply taking his time, Lith discovered that developing the core was the easy part. As its energy grew, so did its affinity toward the hammer. The process required a steady flow of mana, but it would not encounter any resistance. Giving the core the right shape was quite difficult. Instead, the lack of resistance made so that the slightest slip of the mana would create a bump or a cavity, making the pseudo-core defective. To make matters worse, if he developed the mana pathways too slowly, the core energy would disperse. If he developed them too fast, the mana coming from the crystals would flood the core and deform it. Lith used his knowledge of mana cores to find a workaround. He would treat the pseudo-core as a developing mana core and the mana pathways as its host body. He would first grow the core until it gave signs of instability. Then, he would strengthen and enlarge the pathways until the pressure they exerted almost compressed the pseudo-core. At that point, he would focus again on the pseudo-core again, rinse and repeat. Bloom Forge is even slower than Necroforge, but it allows me to enhance the power of single enchantments better. Necroforge, instead, is limited by the massive resistance it encounters during the early steps, but by shaping a complete pseudo-core from outside, it allows me to harmonize multiple enchantments. Lith thought. It seems as quality versus quantity. Solus pondered. For now, yes. Consider that so far, we only created one of the simplest pseudo-cores for the hammers. We have yet to see how the hammer itself changes the rules of the game. When even the second hammer was ready, Lith was once again covered in sweat and tired for the repeated use of invigoration. The only reason he was still able to stand was thanks to his bond with Solus. The mana geyser empowering her would also send energy coursing through his body and grant him uncanny recovery abilities. He was still hungry, though. Damn, I skipped lunch. It's a good thing that yesterday I had a full night's sleep, otherwise my experiment would have failed. Lith said. He took a quick shower before consuming a full-course meal and napping for an hour. Before using either of the hammers, he needed to rest enough to let invigoration bring him back to his peak condition. Ever since Lith had refined a blue core, he would absorb world energy through his nose and skin with every breath, like a much slower version of invigoration that didn't lower his max energy cap. Also, as long as he was inside the tower, the effects of the mana geyser would make him both physically and magically stronger. The two combined effect made so that even a single hour of sleep would greatly rejuvenate his body. Solus spent that hour weighing and caressing the hammers. They were quite ugly, yet everything about them was oddly familiar to her. Lith had already imprinted them with his mana, but she could use them because their bond made their energy signatures almost identical. By my maker, I wish there was something, anything, I could forge master. She sighed. Unfortunately, with a deep green mana core, I'm too weak. I can manipulate the energies of the tower and those from the geyser, but they are not my own. I want to infuse my essence. Using anything else would be pointless. She took the adamant forge out of her pocket dimension, hitting it with the orichalcum hammer in frustration. The silvery sound they emitted scratched at the wall in the back of her head, the source of her recently found memories. She froze, staring blankly into space. Then, she hit the forge again as the echoes of the impact caused her body to shiver and purple flames to fill her mind. Another hit made her remember something. A delicate hand inside a black glove, holding a much better-looking silvery hammer with its surface covered in runes of power. There was something she was working on, but it was blurred behind recognition. Something silvery as well laid between the hammer and the blurred object. Purple flames danced inside a furnace, but Solus couldn't distinguish any of its features. The furnace was too far, and it became more distant by the second until she snapped out of her reverie. Solus hit the forger multiple times, but the memory was lost once again, and no matter how many tears she shed or how much effort she put into hammering, nothing could bring it back. When Lith woke up, he was still very tired, but now invigoration had recovered part of its effectiveness. He found Solus to be quite dispirited despite their earlier success. "Is everything all right, Solus?" he asked. "No. Do you want to talk about it?" "Not now, thanks." Lith decided to not pry further. After reassuring Alina he had missed lunch only because he had been engrossed with his work, he went to Zekel's blacksmith.